Hello there, and thank you for drifting in with us tonight. This evening, we're not chasing galaxies or falling into black holes. Instead, we're slowing down just enough to watch something quietly extraordinary unfold on the edge of our own solar system. Tonight, we're talking about 3I Atlas, the third known interstellar visitor ever detected by humankind. It's a small object, moving fast, but the story it carries is enormous. Because if you've ever wondered whether the universe is truly connected, or if cosmic coincidences ever mean something, this little traveler might just change your view of space forever. Imagine standing outside on a cool night, the air still, the horizon glowing faintly with starlight. Above you, everything seems peaceful, but somewhere out there, between the stars, a faint glint of motion slips across the dark. It's not a comet from our solar system. It's not a rock from Mars. It's something older, stranger, an object that has spent millions of years wandering between suns, now passing close enough for us to notice. And as it drifts by, it reminds us how brief and fragile our cosmic moment really is. Picture that for a second. A piece of another star system, an actual alien rock, or perhaps something less ordinary, sailing silently past our Sunday. It's the kind of thing science fiction has whispered about for decades, and yet here it is, real, measured, and quietly alive with mystery. Before we begin, I'd love to know what time is it where you are, and what's the sky like tonight? Maybe you're listening under the hum of an air conditioner, or maybe you're outside, hearing crickets and feeling the soft pull of sleep. Funny, isn't it? We're talking about visitors from other stars, yet here we are, sharing this quiet little moment on the same small world. So, go ahead, dim the lights, maybe set your phone aside for a while, get comfortable, because the story of 3I Atlas isn't just about astronomy, it's about perspective, how we look up, how we wonder, and how easily our certainties can crumble when something unexpected crosses the sky. And before you drift too deep, ask yourself the kind of absurd, sleepy questions only space can inspire. If an interstellar visitor passed Earth while you were brushing your teeth, would you even know? Would it care? Does it ever get lonely out there, drifting through nothing? Because tonight's story doesn't start with a telescope or a scientist shouting, "Eureka!" It begins, quietly, with a streak of light and the unsettling thought that maybe, just maybe, we're not the only messengers in this cosmic sea. And so, before we see what 3I Atlas truly is, we need to understand what it means, because sometimes the smallest object can open the largest questions. Let's talk about what it feels like when the universe knocks twice. In 2017, a strange traveler slipped past the Sunday. We called it Oumuamua, the first interstellar object ever seen. It arrived without warning and left without answers. 8 years later, another one followed, 3I Atlas. Only this time, we were watching. Telescopes were ready, sensors humming. The universe had pressed replay, and Earth, it seemed, had front row seats. You remember that moment, don't you? When the news slipped quietly through your phone, something from another star, a messenger gliding through the dark, like it knew exactly where it was going. For a second, every late-night scroller became an astronomer, and now the sequel had arrived, streaking across space with the casual confidence of a rock that didn't need introductions. Imagine standing outside, coffee cooling in your hand, while the sky hums with the kind of stillness that only precedes revelation. Above, there's no sound, no color, no drama, just movement. A single, silver glint cutting across the black, calm as a sigh. You can't hear it, but you can feel it, like the air is remembering something ancient. And the world, as usual, reacted beautifully. Half the internet said, Comet. The other half said, aliens. Somewhere in between, scientists sipped lukewarm tea and muttered, we'll see. The night it appeared, you could almost sense a rhythm to the cosmos, like someone had quietly adjusted the metronome of time. Stars that wander, lights that flee. Space itself has memory. The rhyming sentences begin to arrive here, gentle ripples in your drifting thoughts, rocks that spin, dust so thin, stories hide where stars begin. Each phrase paints a picture soft enough for sleep, bright enough for wonder. When 3I Atlas first brushed the edge of our telescopes, it shimmered faintly, a pinprick of rebellion in the calm order of the solar system. It didn't announce itself. It didn't burn. It simply was. Like a note left on the cosmic fridge door. Stopped by. Be back never. Light that bends. Night that sends. Echoes where the silence ends. You picture it gliding between planets, no roar, no trail, no engine hum. Just purpose. Cold and near. Sharp and clear. Whispering paths we almost hear. Every time your mind drifts, the rhyme becomes softer. The images stretch further. Astronomers scrambled. They adjusted coordinates, recalibrated sensors, argued politely over data compression, the kind of chaos that feels almost holy. Somewhere in Hawaii, an observer whispered, "It's coming from Vega's direction," and suddenly humanity had something new to dream about. Stars align, threads entwine, distance folds by slow design. The words feel like light flickering across the lens of your imagination. By the time the official designation arrived 3I Atlas, it already felt mythical. The I for Interstellar, the 3 for its place in line, the Atlas for the sky survey that caught it. Yet beyond the acronyms and trajectories, there was poetry. You could sense it in the way people spoke about it, softly, curiously, like they were talking about a ghost that might be listening. Dust in flight, carved in night, leaving trails of borrowed light. If you close your eyes now, you can almost see it, a shard of metal or ice tumbling endlessly, sunlight flashing across its surface like a heartbeat. The data suggested a speed that didn't belong here, faster than gravity's pull, freer than any planet-bound rock. It wasn't visiting, it was merely passing through, like someone glancing out the window of a train that never stops. Still it spins, through loss and wins, tracing lines where dark begins. For scientists, that's thrilling. For philosophers, that's irresistible. For the rest of us, it's oddly comforting. The thought that even the universe gets visitors it doesn't understand. Heat and cold, tales retold, secrets shimmer bright and bold. By now, the 10th rhyme feels like a lullaby. You breathe slower, you start to drift, but the mystery deepens. Oumuamua, its predecessor, had bent physics just slightly accelerating away from the sun without a visible cause. 3I Atlas seemed to follow that same script. Was it reflecting light strangely, outgassing invisible vapor, or being pushed by something more deliberate? Dreams that fall, stars that call, silence answers after all. The rhymes fade, but their echo lingers, like ripples after a pebble hits still water. If you could float beside it, you'd see a landscape both alien and familiar. Dust clinging to metal, the faint hum of cosmic rays brushing its skin. There's no sound, but somehow it feels alive. You'd reach out though, of course you couldn't, and you'd wonder whether anyone, anywhere, ever meant for it to come here. And beneath that question lies another, quieter one. What if this isn't rare? What if the galaxy is full of wanderers, slipping past unnoticed because we weren't looking yet. Maybe this isn't the second or third visitor. Maybe it's just the latest one we happen to catch mid-flight. In that thought lies a strange serenity, because while the stars keep their secrets, they occasionally drop small hints, not loud ones, not answers, just reminders, that even in all our certainty, the sky is bigger than we think, and always a little busier. You tilt your head toward the darkness, feeling that calm widen in your chest. You're not just listening to a story anymore, you're part of it. One more observer, one more mind catching light that's been traveling for 1,000,000 years, finally arriving, just in time to say, you were looking the right way tonight. And somewhere out there, 3i Atlas keeps drifting, not lost, not found, just passing through, the universe's quiet knock, reminding you that even in the deepest silence, something is always moving. Let's linger for a moment on the name itself. Names are how we make sense of wonder. The name 3i Atlas sounds technical, but in its own quiet way, it's poetic. The I stands for interstellar, meaning it came from beyond our solar system. The 3 marks its place in history, the third visitor we've caught in the act of crossing our sun's domain. Like a postcard from another neighborhood in the galaxy, its arrival reminded us that the space between stars is not empty at all. It's alive with wanderers. You might think of it like cosmic mail, unaddressed, unstamped, delivered on a schedule no one understands. Somewhere out there, drifting through the dark, are billions of such messengers, tiny fragments of worlds we'll never see, carrying minerals older than our sun and dust that once circled some other, forgotten star. Each one an accidental ambassador, each one whispering, "We've been traveling longer than your species has been walking upright." You, standing under your small sky, are suddenly aware of the scale of things. You look up and feel that quiet dizziness that science brings, the kind that doesn't scare you, but softens you. Because for all our technology, our telescopes, our equations and acronyms, we still name things like poets. We look at a frozen pebble from infinity and call it a messenger. It's easy to forget how rare it is to catch something like 3i Atlas. Most interstellar visitors slip through unnoticed, silent as sighs. The odds of one passing near Earth, bright enough to see, are almost absurd, like a single grain of sand wandering into your living room from another beach entirely. And yet, here it was, gliding through our neighborhood, polite enough to announce itself in a brief flash of reflected sunlight. Astronomers tracked it like anxious hosts preparing for unexpected guests. The telescopes pointed, the data flowed, and around the world, a quiet network of sleepy scientists stayed up past midnight comparing notes. Some described it as smooth, others unpredictable. One compared it to a butter knife tumbling through space. That's science speak for, we have no idea what this thing is, but we love it. Imagine being the intern who first spots it bleary-eyed, caffeinated, clicking through sky maps, when suddenly a pixel moves where no pixel should. The heart jumps, the brain doubts, the hand trembles. You refresh the screen. It's still there. You check the telescope logs, cross-reference, and whisper to yourself, "That's not from here." Then, like all good scientists, you panic a little, because discovery always feels like a mistake at first. They named it 3i Atlas, but in a way, it named us back. The moment we noticed it, it reflected our curiosity, our arrogance, our hope that maybe we're not as alone as we sometimes pretend to be. You can almost imagine the scene somewhere else. Another species, another planet, looking up and spotting something from us. Maybe one of our Voyager probes, still humming faintly through the dark, carrying a record of who we were. Maybe they too give it a designation 2x Earth thing and argue late into their alien night about what it means. Maybe one of them says, it's probably just a rock, and another says, or maybe it's a hello, she have despect of the manner, because that's what 3I Atlas is. In its strange, silent way, a hello from somewhere unimaginably far. It's not a warning, not a weapon, not a miracle, just a reminder. The galaxy isn't quiet, we're just new to listening. And if you think about it long enough, the idea becomes oddly comforting. You, lying in your bed on a small spinning planet, are surrounded by a sea of other worlds that occasionally toss something your way. Not to scare you, not to impress you, just to remind you that cosmic loneliness might be more of a choice than a fact. The telescopes captured its path in numbers, arcs, and angles. Its trajectory, its velocity, its brightness, all neat columns on a screen, glowing softly in the dark. Yet what they were really recording was a story of motion and time, a fragment leaving one star, drifting for millions of years, and then, by sheer coincidence, brushing against ours, a cosmic handshake across light years. You might find that thought humbling or hilarious, because if the universe is sending us visitors, it's doing so with the same energy as someone tossing paper airplanes across an infinite room. A bit sloppy, a bit chaotic, but undeniably sincere. Astronomers often joke that space is mostly nothing, but that's the trick. Mostly nothing still leaves room for everything else. Between stars, there's dust, radiation, frozen gas, lonely debris, and now, apparently, a few postcards addressed to whoever happens to be paying attention. So next time you glance up at the night sky, think of 3I Atlas gliding somewhere beyond Mars, already halfway gone. Think of the others still out there, 2I Borisov, 1I Oumuamua, the first, the second, the third messengers. And then think of yourself, another small traveler, awake for a few heartbeats of cosmic time, looking up and wondering what it all means. Because in the end, maybe these objects aren't just messengers from other stars. Maybe they're messengers to us, reminders that discovery doesn't belong to scientists or satellites. It belongs to curiosity itself, to the simple act of noticing. And so, as 3I Atlas drifts onward into the dark, remember, the sky isn't a ceiling, it's a window, and every once in a while something knocks. Let's step outside for a moment, into that quiet stretch of evening where everything feels the same until it suddenly isn't. Imagine gazing up one evening, tracing the familiar constellations, when a faint streak cuts across your view, a trespasser, fast and silent. That was how astronomers first noticed 3I Atlas. A moving point of light, no tail, no glow, no warning, just motion, where there should have been stillness. In a universe that rarely changes quickly, it was as if something had brushed the sky's surface. You know that feeling when you're half asleep on the couch and the TV screen flickers? That half-second glitch that jolts your mind awake. That's what 3I Atlas did to the sky, a cosmic flicker in the background radiation of routine. The stars, usually so smug in their immobility, were briefly humbled by a single speck that refused to stay still. From observatories in Chile to backyards in Canada, telescopes blinked awake. It wasn't supposed to be there. That patch of sky had been catalogued, photographed, and labeled like a museum shelf. But now, in the corner of the frame, was something moving just a little too deliberately, too steady to be a glitch, too clean to be a satellite, too fast to belong here. For the astronomers who spotted it, there was no thunderclap, no cinematic music, just an awkward silence, followed by the rustle of someone refilling a mug of cold coffee and whispering, Science, after all, rarely begins with fireworks. It begins with confusion. The next night, it was still there. Only now it had moved again, cutting another soft line through the black. Someone checked the records for known asteroids, nothing matched. Someone else joked, maybe it's SpaceX's lost luggage. Another muttered, or maybe it's the sequel. That joke wasn't wrong. Oumuamua had been the first. 2. I. Borisov, the second. Now this, the third. A trilogy of interstellar cameos, each one stranger than the last. You could almost imagine the universe releasing them like episodes, each more cryptic than the one before. There's something deeply unsettling about watching motion where motion shouldn't be. The night sky is supposed to be still. That's the contract. You can trust it. Planets glide predictably. Stars hold their places. The cosmos does not improvise. So when something decides to move in a way that doesn't fit the pattern, it feels personal. You lean back, feeling the air shift slightly cooler. Somewhere, the wind hums against the eaves of your house, and suddenly even that feels like part of the same rhythm. The quiet, ancient hum of motion too big for human senses to catch. You start wondering, if you hadn't looked up just then, would 3I Atlas still exist? Not literally, of course, but in your version of the universe, the one that fits inside your head. Maybe it would have passed unseen, unimagined, unacknowledged. Maybe discovery isn't just about light hitting a telescope, but about attention itself, about you deciding to notice. For the people who study the sky, that night became one of those before and after moments. Before, the universe was just a collection of predictable gears and gravitational loops. After, it was a place where surprises could still sneak in. The sky, it turned out, was not finished. Reports spread quickly, mostly among sleepy astronomers, exchanging polite panic through email threads. Screenshots of streaks, coordinates marked in hurried keystrokes. One message read simply, "It moved again." Another, "No, seriously, what is this thing?" Within hours, observatories across the world were staring into the same small patch of sky. It wasn't bright, it wasn't dramatic, but it was undeniably moving faster than an asteroid, cleaner than a comet, stranger than anything that had wandered in recently. It was as though the universe had been running a long exposure photograph for billions of years, and then someone decided to walk across the frame. The next day, the data was confirmed. The movement wasn't random. It had a path, an orbit that didn't belong to us, didn't circle the sun, and didn't intend to stay. A true interstellar visitor, cutting across our solar system like a tourist who refuses to slow down for the landmarks. You picture it now, a thin beam of sunlight glancing off a tumbling surface, a heartbeat of brightness that fades before you can even point to it. It's distant, but somehow, the idea of it feels close. Because for the first time in a long time, the sky had moved, and you had noticed. That realization feels small at first, but then it grows, the way ripples expand across a pond. You start to think about how everything, every pattern, every assumption rests on the illusion of stillness. Yet here's proof that even the quietest parts of the universe are in motion, that nothing, not even starlight, stays where it was. Maybe that's what discovery really is, a polite interruption. The cosmos saying, "I'm still here. I still have surprises." You exhale. The air feels heavier now, or maybe that's just perspective, pressing gently on your chest. Somewhere far above, 3I Atlas keeps moving, silent, indifferent, perfect. And though it doesn't know it, it has already changed something. Not the world, not the orbit, but the quiet way you look up at night. The sky will go back to being still, The stars will resume their ancient choreography, but you'll remember the interruption, that flicker, that trespass, and you'll never again trust the heavens to stay still. Because once you've seen the universe move on its own, the silence of space starts to sound like breathing. Let's talk about how we name things when we don't yet understand them. At first, scientists thought it was just another comet. That's the polite assumption when something small and shiny drifts into view. But 3I Atlas didn't behave like a comet. No bright halo, no streaming tail. It didn't shed ice or gas. It just glided, smoothly, confidently, as though it had done this before. In astronomy, comets are the drama queens of the solar system. They arrive in spectacular fashion, glowing, shedding, streaking across the night like celestial influences craving attention. But 3I Atlas refused to perform. It didn't sparkle, didn't hiss, didn't leave a trace. It was the cosmic equivalent of someone entering a party, refusing small talk, and walking straight out the back door without spilling a drink. You can picture the confusion in mission control. "It's a comet," someone said confidently. "Definitely a comet." Then a pause. "Except, it's not acting like one." Silence. A click of a pen. Someone refilled their coffee. Another muttered, "Maybe it's shy." Comets are made of ice, dust, and regret leftovers from the solar system's chaotic youth. When they approach the sun, the heat wakes them up. They hiss and shed gas like sleepy dragons, forming those glowing tails we find so hypnotic. But when scientists zoomed in on 3I Atlas, there was none of that. It was calm, controlled, cool. That's what made it unnerving, because in the language of space, motion without chaos is suspicious. Everything wobbles, burns, collides, or breaks apart. Only something built or extraordinarily lucky could glide through sunlight without flinching. Imagine you're an astronomer watching this thing. Night after night, you track it. Every data point says it should be a comet, and yet every image insists it isn't. You'd start to question your telescope, your math, your career choices, maybe even your sanity, because it's one thing when the universe surprises you. It's another when it breaks your favorite categories. There's a kind of beauty in that defiance. 3I Atlas didn't shout. "Look at me," it whispered. "Define me." And that's worse, because you can't. The first reports trickled into observatories around the world. Possible interstellar comet. No visible outgassing. High reflectivity. Inconsistent with dust composition. Translated into normal language. We have no idea what this thing is, but it's shiny and rude about it. Someone proposed it might be made of something reflective like metal. That's the word that always gets everyone excited. Metal. Because in space, metal means technology. And technology means, well, aliens. Cue the dramatic music. But the truth was simpler and weirder. Some speculated that 3I Atlas could be made of solid hydrogen ice, a rare, nearly invisible material that sublimates too subtly to detect. Others thought it might be nitrogen ice, like a chip broken off a faraway planet's frozen crust. Each theory sounded plausible until the math refused to cooperate, and so the object sat there, glowing faintly, defying everyone's expectations. Too fast for an asteroid, too quiet for a comet, too reflective for rock, too cold for gas. It was the cosmic version of that one student who shows up on the first day of class and already knows the syllabus. What struck people most was the way it moved. Comets tumble, spin, sway messy motion, like something alive and indecisive. 3I Atlas didn't. It glided with eerie precision, like it was on rails. Smooth, consistent, efficient. One astronomer described it as motion with manners. Another simply said, "It moves like it's done this before." By now, the headlines had begun. The comet that refused to be one. Astronomers baffled. Interstellar object defies definition. You could practically hear the collective shrug of the scientific community. It's probably fine. Probably. You imagine people around the world scrolling past those articles between weather reports and cat videos, pausing just long enough to think, that's strange. Then moving on. Because strangeness, it turns out, is easier to accept than to examine. But late at night, when the data teams compared notes and rechecked the light curves, a quiet unease crept in. If it wasn't behaving like a comet, what was it? If it wasn't natural, then whose was it? And if it was natural, how many more like it are out there passing by unseen, too faint to notice, too fast to catch? You start to wonder what would happen if one of these ever decided to stop, to slow down, to park itself in orbit. Would we even believe it? Or would we politely call it a comet again and pretend the universe hadn't just waved? Because that's the strange comfort of science. When we don't understand something, we rename it until we do. And so, officially, 3I Atlas remained a comet. Unofficially, it was a question mark with velocity, a wanderer that refused to play by the rules of ice and dust. You picture it again, sliding through sunlight, turning slightly, no plume, no flare, no apology. It keeps its secrets close, and in doing so, earns your respect, not because it explains itself, but because it doesn't need to. In the end, 3I Atlas reminded everyone that space doesn't owe us neat categories. It owes us curiosity, and as it drifted onward, quiet and composed, it left behind a simple truth. Sometimes, the universe sends a visitor that isn't here to dazzle, only to confuse, delight, and remind you that probably just a comet is never the end of the story. Let's shift the focus from the wanderer itself to the eyes that caught it, the ones staring, blinking, and never sleeping. The Atlas project, short for Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System, was built to spot potential cosmic hazards. Ironically, it found something that was no threat at all, yet far more intriguing. While it watched the skies for danger, it stumbled upon wonder. 3I Atlas was like a message caught in a net, meant for meteors. You can picture the system as a patient fisherman, casting its digital nets across the heavens, waiting for the faintest ripple in the light. Every night, Atlas sweeps the sky with mechanical precision twin observatories, one on Mauna Loa, the other on Haleakala, perched high above the Hawaiian clouds. Together, they scan the universe in 4 wide-field eyes, photographing the same sections of sky over and over, like someone nervously checking if they left the stove on, except the stove, in this case, is the entire cosmos. The idea behind Atlas was simple and heroic. Catch the rocks before they catch us. Its job is to give humanity a 24-hour heads up before anything with bad intentions and sufficient momentum shows up uninvited. It's the celestial version of a smoke alarm, except instead of smoke, it's on the lookout for fiery death from above. But on that quiet evening, Atlas found something that wasn't a threat at all. It was just beautiful, quiet, oddly polite, in fact. There's something endearing about that, isn't there? We build giant machines to defend ourselves, to watch for doom, and instead, they find poetry. The universe, it seems, has a sense of humor. You wanted danger, it says. Here, have mystery instead. You can imagine the moment of discovery. The telescope operator leans back, watching the real-time data feed scroll across the monitor. Dots flicker, shift, vanish. Most of them are known objects, comets, satellites, bits of space junk. But one flicker doesn't fit the pattern. It moves differently, not fast, not slow, just confidently, like it knows it's being watched. We've got something weird, someone mutters. They check the coordinates. Not on the chart. They check again. Still not there. And then, that familiar mix of excitement and dread floods the room. Because when Atlas finds something unlisted, it usually means one of two things. A, we're all about to have a very bad day. Or B, we've just discovered something history will name after us. This one, thankfully, was the latter. They followed it for hours, then nights. It drifted, not toward Earth, but across the solar plane, fast, smooth, deliberate. It didn't care about us at all, but oh, how we cared about it. If you've ever stayed up too late watching a movie you didn't mean to start, you know the feeling. You can't look away. The sky was doing something it hadn't done before, and Atlas, our watchful guardian, was recording every frame. There's a wonderful irony here. Atlas was designed to spot apocalypse, and instead it found art. While searching for destruction, it stumbled across elegance. It's like setting up a home security camera and accidentally filming a miracle. Scientists began calling it 3-Eye Atlas, in honor of the project that found it. It's not often you get to name an object from another star system after your own telescope. That's the astronomical equivalent of finding a unicorn in your backyard and calling it Jeff. Still, the name fits, because in a way, the telescope had discovered its own reflection, a traveler, like itself, scanning the void, searching for something it couldn't define. You too can imagine standing beside that machine on the mountain, the air thin and cold, your breath a faint ghost in the dark. The dome hums faintly as motors shift. The night sky stretches above, enormous and quiet. And then, in one pixel of one frame, a spark appears, something moving where nothing should move. The kind of motion that wakes ancient instincts, curiosity, fear, awe, all at once. The next morning, the data was everywhere. Astronomers in different time zones blinked at their screens and thought, that can't be right. The measurements said it was traveling too fast to belong here on a hyperbolic path, cutting straight through the solar system like a letter that missed its mailbox. It wasn't headed toward us, but it wasn't headed away from anything either, just passing through, and that's what made it fascinating. When the official press release went out, it sounded so calm. Atlas detects possible interstellar object. But between those lines was something electric, the quiet thrill of finding something no one expected. Maybe that's what discovery always feels like. Not fireworks, not revelation, just a flicker on a screen that makes the world slightly larger than it was before. 3-Eye Atlas reminded its discoverers, and maybe all of us, that vigilance doesn't always find danger. Sometimes it finds meaning. Sometimes it finds proof that the universe, for all its indifference, is still full of surprises. And somewhere high on that Hawaiian mountaintop, under air so thin you can taste the stars, Atlas keeps scanning night after night, patient and tireless. Because who knows what else is out there? Another rock? Another message? Another cosmic visitor brushing the edge of our awareness? If you stand still and listen, you might even hear it, the soft electric sigh of a telescope that's still looking, still learning, still waiting for the sky to interrupt itself again. Let's slow things down for a moment so we can appreciate just how fast this thing was moving. Most comets crawl. This one sprinted. 3-Eye Atlas was moving at over 90,000 kilometers per hour, fast enough to escape not just Earth's gravity, but the sun's too. That's the giveaway. Only something born beyond our solar system can move that freely. Everything else is trapped, endlessly orbiting. But this was a drifter. To put that in perspective, if 3I Atlas were a car on a highway, it would circle Earth in less than 30 minutes, blow past every radar gun, and still have time to stop for cosmic coffee somewhere near Jupiter. The fastest human-made object, the Parker Solar Probe, moves at around 700,000 kilometers per hour, but it needed decades of planning and gravitational gymnastics to do that. 3I Atlas did it naturally, effortlessly, like it had been speeding through infinity for ages. The first time scientists calculated its velocity, they double-checked the math 3 times. "That can't be right," someone murmured in a lab somewhere. "Run it again." They did. The numbers laughed back at them. 90,000 kilometers per hour, and not slowing down. The only way to move like that is to be free, unbound by the sun's pull, untouched by its authority. Everything in our solar system is caught in that golden leash. Planets, moons, asteroids, comets, all dancing politely around the star that feeds them. But 3I Atlas didn't dance. It barged through the ballroom, tipped its invisible hat, and left. You have to admire the audacity. It's like watching someone skip the entire airport security line and walk straight onto the plane. "Sir, you can't." "Oh, he's gone." Astronomers call this a hyperbolic trajectory. It means its path curves through the solar system and then back out, never looping, never returning. It's the geometry of freedom. For everything born inside our system, escape is a dream to achieve it. You'd need to move faster than 42 kilometers per second, the local speed limit at Earth's orbit. 3I Atlas was going double that. It didn't even need a reason. It was just passing through, the celestial equivalent of a tourist who doesn't take pictures. When you imagine it now, a faint glint against the black, tumbling silently, you can almost hear the hum of motion, a sound too low for ears, too steady for time, a rhythm of cosmic solitude. There's something strangely comforting about the idea of a wanderer moving too fast to belong anywhere. You might even relate to it: the late-night scrolling, the restless thoughts, the quiet drift between one orbit and another. The human mind, like interstellar dust, was built to wander. If you could somehow hitch a ride on 3I Atlas, what would it feel like? The stars would barely move. They'd shimmer, yes, but distance would betray them. You'd float in an ocean of black, feeling neither speed nor direction. 90,000 kilometers per hour, and yet everything around you still, because speed in space is relative, and in the vacuum, there's nothing to rush against. That's the paradox of cosmic velocity. The faster you go, the quieter it feels. Back on Earth, scientists tried to trace its origin. They pointed their digital fingers toward the constellation Draco, but the trail was faint, like footprints in dust after a windstorm. Wherever 3I Atlas came from, it had been traveling for millions of years through starlight and silence, through forces too vast for imagination. It had outlived worlds. It had passed through the invisible borders of gravity wells, radiation fields, and cosmic storms, untouched. And yet, for a few brief days, it crossed our sky. You think about that. All that time, all that distance, for a moment so small, it barely registers on the timeline of existence. It's poetic, really, like the universe composing a haiku and then crumpling the page. It makes you wonder, how many others pass by unseen? For every object we catch, 1,000 glide unnoticed, a cosmic traffic jam that we can't perceive. The Milky Way might be full of such travelers, fragments of long-dead systems, frozen relics of alien worlds, Or maybe just rocks doing their best impressions of significance. When astronomers announced the speed of 3I Atlas, the reactions were predictable. Some were thrilled. This is history. Others skeptical. Check the math. And then there were the dreamers. What if it's a ship? Because let's face it, when something moves that fast and that smooth, it's hard not to imagine a hand at the wheel. But perhaps it doesn't need a pilot. Perhaps speed itself is its purpose. Maybe that's how the universe explores itself, by flinging its pieces into the dark and watching where they end up. And maybe, in some small way, that's what you're doing too, moving fast through thoughts, drifting between ideas, unanchored but curious, speed without direction, yet somehow exactly where you're meant to be. The strange comfort is this. 3. Atlas doesn't belong anywhere, but it belongs to everywhere. It's part of every sky it's ever crossed, every star it's ever ignored, every telescope that ever caught its fleeting light. And maybe that's all belonging really, is not staying still, but being seen, if only for a moment. Let's talk about shapes, the kind that don't fit into the boxes we've built for them. When astronomers turned their lenses toward 3I Atlas, they found a shape that defied expectations. Long, thin, bright. Some saw a cylinder, others saw a flattened shard. And somewhere online, someone immediately said, "It looks like a spaceship." Because of course they did. You can't blame them. Humanity has spent centuries staring into the sky, waiting for something vaguely ship-shaped to appear. It's practically instinct. You grow up watching science fiction, and suddenly, a tumbling stick of light streaks through space. What else are you going to think? The rational part of your brain whispers, "It's just a rock." But another part, the one that doodles sources in the margins of notebooks, murmurs, "But what if it isn't?" Astronomers tried to measure it properly. That's harder than it sounds. All they had was sunlight, faint reflections flickering across detectors, each one a clue. When plotted over time, the brightness dipped and rose every few hours, like a cosmic heartbeat. That rhythm meant the object was spinning, not gracefully, but clumsily tumbling end over end, like a baton dropped by a distracted juggler. But that wasn't the strange part. The strange part was how extreme the light variations were, sometimes bright as metal, sometimes dim as dust. It meant one side was far wider than the other, a body many times longer than it was thick. That kind of ratio doesn't happen often in nature. Comets and asteroids tend to be potato-shaped, charmingly irregular but never sleek. 3I Atlas. It looked aerodynamic, as if space had carved it on purpose. The first models that came out of the data looked absurd, a pencil tumbling through infinity. Then someone joked, "What if it's not a pencil, but a panel?" That word panel spread through the internet like static. Suddenly the theories multiplied. A broken fragment of a shattered planet, a defunct probe from another civilization, an alien solar sail drifting on forgotten light. And yet, when you think about it, there's something almost poetic about scientists arguing over the shape of an object they'll never touch. It's like arguing about the personality of a ghost. Every answer says more about the observer than the observed. One astronomer said, "It's cigar-shaped." Another replied, "No, it's flat like a pancake." A third, clearly exhausted, sighed and said, "It's whatever shape makes you happy." The truth is, in the dark, everything's a little bit of everything. When light is the only language we have, interpretation becomes art. The photons that touched 3I Atlas left millions of years ago, bouncing between stars before they reached our instruments. By the time they arrived, they were tired, distorted, carrying only whispers of the original story. And yet, from those whispers, we built a mythology, You imagine the scientists watching the brightness fluctuate, translating it into sketches, each diagram slightly different. A cylinder here, a disk there. The arguments spilling into conference calls at unreasonable hours. Someone says, "It can't be that shiny unless it's metal." Someone else mutters, "If it's metal, I quit." Laughter follows. It's nervous laughter, the kind people use when they realize the universe isn't obligated to make sense. But for a brief, wonderful moment, the internet joined in. Artists drew it gliding through the solar system like a silver needle. Commenters insisted it was alien tech. Conspiracy videos bloomed overnight, narrated in hushed tones. They don't want you to know. You roll your eyes, but you click anyway because deep down, you want to believe. And isn't that what all of this really is? Not proof of aliens, but proof of wanting aliens. Of yearning for company in a sky too big to be empty. The scientists, meanwhile, tried to keep their composure. They wrote careful papers, filled with cautious words like anomalous reflectivity and non-gravitational acceleration. But between the lines, you could sense the wonder that quiet admission. We've never seen anything like this. Still, they knew better than to say the A word. In science, alien is the career-ending equivalent of shouting fire in a crowded theatre. So they said unusual, they said novel, they said unprecedented, which of course all mean the same thing. We don't know, and it's amazing. You can imagine 3I Atlas itself spinning slowly, unaware of the commotion it's caused. On one side, sunlight glints off a smooth, pale surface. On the other, darkness swallows the light completely. Each turn is a conversation between brightness and shadow, as if the object is keeping secrets and revealing them rhythmically, teasingly. And as you watch from your small corner of the galaxy, you realize how fragile the line is between explanation and imagination, between data and dreams. Maybe it really was just an oddly shaped rock. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe that question, that shape of a question, is the real discovery. Because sometimes, what we find in the sky isn't an answer at all, but an invitation to wonder. As it tumbled away, 3I Atlas left us with more questions than facts, more awe than clarity. Its shape, undefined and undefinable, became a mirror, one reflecting not its own mystery, but ours. And in that reflection, for a brief, shimmering moment, humanity remembered how to look up and ask, what if? Let's drift closer now, into the static between signals that eerie pause, where science meets suspicion. Then came the odd part. Just as 3I Atlas passed near Mars, the perfect observation point, a NASA livestream cut out mid-transmission. A coincidence, officials said, caused by a government shutdown. Still, it was hard not to notice the timing. The universe has a sense of humor, and apparently, so does bureaucracy. It was supposed to be a routine feed, a calm, background hum of cosmic telemetry, the kind you could fall asleep to. The Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter had been transmitting updates for days, steady, reliable, comforting in their monotony. And then, silence. Not static, not interference, just absence. For a few seconds, the stream hung there, frozen, the last frame showing the faint red arc of Mars, a blur of stars, and what might have been a glint. Then the signal dropped. Screens went black. Someone in mission control swore softly, and another voice, too calm, too tired, said, "It's fine. It's just the shutdown." Sure, you know that special kind of silence when the power goes out, and you realize how many things used to hum. That's what the live stream's absence felt like. The world suddenly aware of the quiet it had been ignoring. Within hours, the internet noticed. Forums lit up. Tweets appeared faster than NASA statements. Coincidence? Someone asked. Always, someone else replied. Except when it isn't. People started re-watching the last available seconds of footage, zooming in on pixels, enhancing, speculating. A bright streak near Mars, a faint shimmer near the sunlit edge. Some swore it was 3I Atlas. Others claimed it wasn't there at all. A few, predictably, declared it was moving intelligently, which, on the internet, means I want this to be aliens. Please don't ruin it with math. NASA, of course, eventually clarified. The outage, they explained, was due to a temporary system suspension caused by administrative closures during the budget lapse. In other words, the government was on break, and so was the cosmos. But people don't like coincidences, especially ones that arrive wrapped in mystery. The timing was just too good. The interstellar visitor approaches its closest observation window, and the very agency built to watch the sky suddenly can't log in. It was like finally getting binoculars, then being told, sorry, batteries not included. To be fair, NASA has enough experience with conspiracy theories to treat them like cosmic weather, inevitable, mildly annoying, mostly harmless. Still, in those few silent hours, the imagination of Earth ran wild. One popular theory suggested that 3I Atlas wasn't just reflecting sunlight, it was responding to it. If it's artificial, one post claimed, it might be signaling. Maybe NASA noticed and had to shut the feed. Another said, they're probably negotiating first contact. Someone replied, with who? Mars? And someone else added, well, they do need better PR. Humor aside, there was a strange energy in that silence. For once, the absence of data felt louder than the data itself. The world was used to being shown everything, every second. The live stream ending felt like a curtain falling, and everyone wanted to peek behind it. Scientists, to their credit, did not indulge the hysteria. Technical downtime, they repeated. Pure coincidence. But even among them, there were whispers, private ones, half joking, half curious, because they'd seen the footage too. They'd seen the shimmer. They'd felt that gut-level tug, the one that says, something's not lining up here. Of course, when the feed returned, everything was back to normal. Mars spun quietly. The stars twinkled responsibly. 3I Atlas had moved on, farther and fainter. Nothing to see, nothing to question. And yet, something lingered, that sense of being watched back. The sky, once again, had blinked first. You imagine sitting at home that night, reading the headlines. NASA clarifies transmission error. No evidence of anomalies. Live stream outage purely administrative. You nod. Logical. Sensible. Then you scroll to the next post. Could 3I Atlas be observing us? You laugh. You don't believe it. But you don't scroll past right away either. That's how it starts. Curiosity dressed up as doubt. Maybe it really was coincidence. After all, humans are experts at seeing patterns where there are none. But maybe, and this is the fun part, maybe the timing wasn't off at all. Maybe the universe likes to sync its mysteries with our paperwork, just to keep things interesting. Because really, what's more poetic than the cosmos choosing the one moment our bureaucrats stopped watching to do something extraordinary? If nothing else, the NASA silence became part of the legend. It turned a simple astronomical observation into a story, a bedtime riddle whispered between stars and screens. And maybe that's all it needed to be. A pause, a breath, a cosmic wink that reminded us that silence, too, can be data. Because sometimes the most unsettling part of discovery isn't what we see, it's what disappears the moment we try. Let's stay with Mars for a moment, that dusty neighbor, always watching from the cold sidelines of history. On Mars, NASA's Perseverance rover quietly turned its camera toward the visitor. The image it captured, a faint streaked line, set the internet ablaze. To most scientists, it was a motion artifact. To others, it was something else entirely. But even through the pixelated blur, the idea was clear. We were not just observers anymore. We were hosts. Picture the scene: the Martian horizon, a rust-colored expanse fading into thin air. The sunlight there is pale, weak, like a flashlight struggling through fog. Perseverance sits still, wheels dusted in crimson powder, its cameras squinting toward the sky. A machine built to study rocks, now filming history in the making. In the frame, a thin streak, faint as a scar. It cuts diagonally across the image, too sharp to be dust, too strange to be dismissed. The data logs show it lasted less than a second. One frame, one instant. And yet, that single instant was enough. Within hours, the raw image had made its way online, where patience and nuance go to die. NASA captures alien craft above Mars. Read one headline. First contact confirmed? Asked another. And somewhere, inevitably, a YouTuber whispered, "They don't want you to see this." NASA, bless them, tried to clarify. Motion artifact, they said. Probably cosmic radiation or sensor noise. But explanations like that don't stand a chance against imagination. You can't put the genie back into the cosmic bottle once people start circling blurry screenshots in red digital ink. Still, even among professionals, the image was curious. It wasn't the usual horizontal streak caused by a moving satellite. It was angled, almost vertical. That suggested a path cutting downward, toward Mars, not across. And that single implication that something might have entered the Martian atmosphere was enough to make even the skeptics pause. One planetary scientist said, "If it's just noise, it's beautifully timed noise." Another replied, "Coincidence is a very confident word for something that happened once." You can imagine the rover itself, humming quietly under the thin sky, unaware of the human chaos it had caused. Its processors, efficient and unromantic, catalogued the image, tagged it, and moved on. No speculation. No wonder. Machines, after all, have no time for legends. But you do. You can't help but wonder what it must have looked like from the ground. That bright line cutting through the red haze. A fleeting spark over a planet that hasn't seen lightning in 1 billion years. The thin air would have swallowed the sound, but maybe, just maybe, if you stood there, you'd feel it. The vibration of something ancient, brushing the edge of another world. For the scientists, the real question wasn't, what is it, but why now? Mars and Earth had aligned perfectly for observation, a coincidence of celestial geometry that doesn't happen often. 3. Atlas had passed near enough that, for one improbable moment, 3 worlds, Earth, Mars, and the wandering interstellar visitor, were linked in one line of sight. 3 dots, one cosmic alignment. It was as if the universe had paused for a family photo, and in that photo, there was the streak. Maybe it really was nothing, just a blip, a fluke, the ghost of sunlight on a lens. But even nothing can mean something if it happens in the right moment, because the truth is, every great discovery starts as a smudge. The first exoplanet was just a wobble in a star's light. The first pulsar was just a repeating click, mistaken for interference. Sometimes, noise becomes signal simply because someone decides to listen. That's what makes this image so haunting. Not because it proves anything, but because it reminds us how fragile proof really is. One picture, one pixel, 1 second, and suddenly, an entire species is staring into the void, whispering, "What if, on Mars, the red dust never stops moving? It curls around rocks, seeps into cracks, coats everything in silence. It doesn't care what we see or what we believe. But maybe, just for that fraction of a second, even Mars looked up. Maybe even the dust paused. And maybe, from the perspective of 3I Atlas, the whole thing was irrelevant. One tiny machine, one tiny world, looking back with wide, astonished eyes. Still, that's the magic of moments like this. They don't need to be certain to be meaningful. They only need to exist long enough to make us wonder. You imagine the rover's camera cooling back down, its sensors resetting. Somewhere in its databanks, the streak sits quietly, stored among thousands of other frames, a line of light frozen forever in Martian time. One day, maybe, someone will revisit that frame with better tools. Maybe they'll find nothing at all, or maybe they'll find everything. For now, the red dust keeps blowing, covering old tracks, erasing footprints, even robotic ones. The sky returns to its endless rust-colored stillness. The rover hums, the signal streams back to Earth. And far beyond it all, 3I Atlas keeps moving silent, indifferent, unbothered by the storm of theories it left in its wake. But if you listen closely, beneath the hum of the machines and the whisper of the Martian wind, you might hear the faintest sound, not of confirmation, not of denial, but of curiosity itself, rustling like dust across the stars. Let's sit in the theater of imagination for a while, the one where science meets storytelling, and everyone's sure they're right. Was it rod-shaped, disc-shaped, or something we couldn't yet describe? The arguments spilled, from astronomy journals to late-night talk shows. 3I Atlas became less a rock and more a Rorschach test. Whatever you wanted it to be, it became. The human brain loves stories, and when it can't find one, it invents one. It started innocently enough. Scientists trying to fit numbers into shapes. Based on light variation, one said, "It's long and narrow." Another countered, "No, it's flat and wide like a cosmic potato chip." And someone else, probably after a third cup of coffee, said, "Maybe it's both." That's the beauty and curse of astronomy. You're always reconstructing reality from a handful of photons that have spent years pretending to be trustworthy. You don't see what's out there. You guess. You model. You draw with math and hope the universe doesn't laugh too loudly. But humanity, bless it, doesn't stop at math. Once the shape debate escaped the labs, it evolved like a rumor at a family reunion. Overnight, 3I Atlas became everything to everyone. On Reddit, it was a monolithic ship. On YouTube, it was a fragment of alien engineering. On Twitter, or whatever we're calling it this year, it was proof we've been visited, complete with blurry renderings and too much lens flare. A comedian joked, "It's either a spaceship or a cosmic breadstick. Either way, I hope it's gluten-free." And just like that, 3I Atlas stopped being a celestial object and became a cultural one. A mirror for our obsessions, fears, and late-night curiosities. The arguments grew so passionate that some scientists started keeping score. There were rod believers and disc believers. You could almost imagine them forming rival clubs. Team Cylinder, printing shirts that said "Stay elongated," while Team Pancake countered with "Flat is the new round." But beneath the laughter was something deeper, a truth about human nature. We can't stand not knowing. When we see something extraordinary, our first impulse isn't to accept it. It's to define it. And if we can't define it, we project onto it until it feels familiar. In that sense, 3i Atlas wasn't just an object. It was a psychological experiment conducted at planetary scale. Because what does it say about us? That our first reaction to mystery is to turn it into metaphor. When you looked at 3i Atlas, what did you see? A rock? A ship? A sign? It didn't matter which. What mattered was why. If you needed proof that the universe held more than cold equations, it became a messenger. If you wanted confirmation that we're alone, it became debris. The object itself never changed. Only the stories we wrapped around it did. The irony, of course, is that while we were arguing about shapes, the real object was probably laughing. Or, if it couldn't laugh, at least it was tumbling gracefully, indifferent to human labels. Back in the observatories, astronomers quietly kept refining their models. Each new image added a fraction of clarity, and yet, the answer only seemed to blur further. The more they looked, the less sense it made. Some nights, it reflected like metal. Other nights, it swallowed light like ash. It didn't behave like anything natural, but not convincingly unnatural either. It hovered in that uncomfortable middle space where facts dissolve into fascination. At one point, a researcher sighed in an interview. It's not about the shape anymore. It's about what people need it to be. And that line stuck, because it was true not only for 3i Atlas, but for everything that confuses us. Love, history, religion, politics. We fill the blanks in the universe with reflections of ourselves. Maybe that's the real meaning of the shape debate. Not a battle over geometry, but a lesson in psychology. When faced with the unknown, humans see themselves magnified, mythologized, and slightly ridiculous. And maybe that's okay. Maybe curiosity always wears a little absurdity. If you stood outside on a clear night and looked up, you wouldn't see rods or discs or anything shaped like certainty. You'd see the faint glitter of questions, old ones, slow ones, drifting through space like cosmic punctuation marks. The object itself has long since moved on, vanishing into darkness. But the debate it sparked, that's still tumbling through podcasts, classrooms, coffee shops, the story of a shape that was never really about shape at all, but about meaning. Because in the end, the universe doesn't care what we think it looks like. It just keeps sending us Rorschach tests disguised as comets. And every time we stare into the inkblot sky, we learn a little more about the galaxy and a lot more about ourselves. Let's open an old chapter for a moment, the one that began with a different name, but a familiar mystery. We'd seen something like this before. Oumuamua, our first visitor, had behaved just as strangely. It accelerated after leaving the sun, even though it had no visible jets or tail. 3i Atlas seemed to follow the same rulebook, as though these travelers shared a blueprint. Two guests from the same cosmic road trip. When Oumuamua first arrived in 2017, it was like a whisper that turned into a shout. Discovered by a telescope in Hawaii, it slipped through our solar system on a slanted path, a streak of light that didn't fit the usual molds. No cometary tail, no familiar wobble, just a sleek shape and a subtle push that shouldn't have existed. The universe, it seemed, had nudged it lightly, deliberately, as if to say, "Keep moving, little one." They're watching. Scientists puzzled over that acceleration for months. Normally, when a comet speeds up after rounding the sun, we blame the outgassing jets of vaporized ice acting like tiny thrusters. But Oumuamua had no jets. None that we could see. The math said it was being propelled. The telescope said it wasn't. And that contradiction sat in the middle of astronomy like a pebble in a shoe. Fast forward 8 years, and here comes 3i Atlas, another visitor, another enigma. The déjà vu was immediate. Similar speed, similar reflectivity, similar indifference to being labeled. It was like the universe had hit, repeat, sending a sequel no one had asked for, but everyone secretly wanted. There's something eerie about repetition in space. You expect randomness, chaos, unpredictability, not patterns. So when scientists noticed how closely 3I Atlas mirrored its older cousin, the mood shifted from curiosity to quiet unease. "It's behaving," one astrophysicist said, as if it read the same instruction manual. And that's when the theories returned, all the old ghosts of Oumuamua reborn under a new name. Was it natural, artificial, a shard from some long-dead system, a probe gone adrift? The questions weren't new. They were echoes, repeating like light from a mirror facing itself. But this time, there was a difference. We were ready. Telescopes had been recalibrated, observation networks synced. If Oumuamua had caught us by surprise, 3I Atlas was caught mid-entrance, the celestial equivalent of being photographed while stepping off the train. And yet, even with all our preparation, it still managed to leave us confused, because both objects, though separated by years and space, carried the same peculiar signature, a motion that hinted at purpose, yet revealed nothing. It's strange, isn't it? How a rock can feel intentional. You imagine them now, these two travelers, Oumuamua leading the way, 3I Atlas following behind. Maybe they left the same, distant star system. Maybe they're fragments of the same forgotten world, pieces of a planet shattered before Earth even existed. Or maybe, and this is the thought that keeps scientists awake, they're part of something ongoing, a pattern we've only just begun to notice. The universe loves patterns. After all, it hides them in orbits, in gravity, in the dance of galaxies. But sometimes, those patterns look back. Somewhere, in the archives of NASA and the European Space Agency, you can find graphs comparing the two visitors, curves and slopes, dots and dips, like two fingerprints pressed onto the same page. One labeled 1I, Oumuamua, the other 3I divided by Atlas. Between them, an absence 2I, Borisov, the middle child of mystery, more comet than curiosity, but still an outlier. The data aligns almost perfectly, as though the cosmos had composed a trilogy and was waiting for us to notice. In late-night research calls, scientists joked about it. Maybe they're breadcrumbs, someone said. The universe leaving us a trail, another replied. I just hope we're not the ducks. But humor aside, there's an ache in that repetition, the feeling that something's just out of reach, circling us from far away, repeating itself like an echo across time. You think of how sound behaves in a canyon, how your voice bounces back, distorted but familiar. Maybe that's what these visitors are, echoes of something larger, signals rebounding across the dark, whispering the same secret in different accents. And maybe the reason we keep finding them isn't because they're rare, but because we've finally learned to listen. For all our satellites and probes, our grand ambitions to reach other worlds, it's humbling to realize that the first true interstellar messengers came to us. They crossed the stars without our help, sailed through our sun's domain without permission, and reminded us gently that we're not the only travelers out here. They didn't speak, didn't beam signals, didn't leave monuments, but they rhymed. Their paths, their speeds, their peculiar silences, all repeating, like stanzas in a poem, written on a cosmic scale. And that's the thing about echoes. You can never tell if they're coming from ahead or behind. So, as 3I Atlas fades into the black, following Oumuamua's long, invisible trail, the question remains, how many echoes are left? How many have already passed, unnoticed, before we learn to listen for them? Maybe there will be a 4I, a 5I, a sixth eye still waiting their turn to glide by. Or maybe these two are enough, a matched pair of mysteries, reminding us that even silence has structure, because sometimes the universe doesn't answer. Sometimes it just repeats itself until we finally start paying attention. Let's enter, softly now, into the most dangerous territory in science, the land of what if. Is 3I Atlas alien technology? That's the question that haunts every YouTube comment section and every sleepless scientist. Harvard astronomer Avi Loeb has argued that such possibilities deserve serious attention. After all, it's easier to dismiss a mystery than to understand it. But in science, curiosity is the first step toward truth. The phrase alien technology tends to light up the imagination, like dry grass in summer. The words themselves feel forbidden, even playful. They turn sensible scientists into reluctant philosophers, and internet commenters into astrophysicists with Wi-Fi access. Yet behind the noise, there's a quiet reason to ask the question, not because we expect the answer to be yes, but because refusing to ask would mean we've stopped wondering. Avi Loeb, a Harvard astrophysicist known for occasionally poking the universe with a stick, famously suggested that Oumuamua, our first interstellar visitor, could be artificial, not proof of aliens, but a possibility worth testing. His reasoning was simple. The object's odd acceleration and shape didn't fit natural explanations, so why not keep the door open? Extraordinary claims, he said, require extraordinary evidence but not extraordinary silence. That's where 3I Atlas entered the conversation uninvited. But right on cue, another object with the same anomalies, another visitor, accelerating, as though some invisible hand were giving it a nudge. The coincidence was too neat to ignore. Of course, most astronomers rolled their eyes politely. It's not aliens, they said. It's never aliens. Which is, historically speaking, exactly what people say right before it is. Still, Loeb's point lingered. If we keep building instruments to detect the unusual, shouldn't we be brave enough to face it when we actually do? What if 3I Atlas isn't a comet, or a fragment, or a space rock, but a piece of something, designed something built long before our species had opposable thumbs? Now, before your heartbeat speeds up, let's be clear, there's no evidence of alien engineering here. No metal, no signals, no markings that say, property of galactic FedEx, just patterns motion that resists easy math, reflectivity that confuses instruments, but science begins exactly there, at confusion's doorstep. You can imagine the split in the community. On one side, the skeptics, grounded and firm. Nature is weird enough. Don't invoke ET when sunlight will do. On the other, the dreamers. But what if sunlight doesn't do? Between them stands curiosity, that fragile bridge built from equal parts data and hope. There's something beautiful in that balance, because every great discovery, from radio waves to relativity, began as a question that sounded ridiculous. Someone had to be brave enough to ask the thing that would get them laughed out of the room. And sometimes, those were the questions that changed the room entirely. Maybe that's what the alien hypothesis really represents. Not belief in visitors, but permission to wonder. Still, the human imagination doesn't do moderation well. Within hours of the hypothesis resurfacing, the internet had already decided. There were documentaries in progress, podcasts whispering about the probe, and animated diagrams showing 3I Atlas unfolding like origami. A few artists even rendered it as a sleek metallic craft, complete with mysterious glowing engines that, in reality, absolutely do not exist. And yet, there's an odd comfort in those fantasies, because even if they're wrong, and they probably are, they remind us how badly we want not to be alone. If you're listening to this now, late at night, half asleep, you can feel that longing in your chest, that soft ache for connection across impossible distances. Maybe 3i Atlas isn't alien, but it still feels like a hello from something vast, a reminder that the stars aren't just decoration, they're destinations. Even the skeptics, deep down, understand that allure. They joke about it, but their telescopes still point upward, because whether we're hunting for comets or company, the act is the same. We look up and hope something looks back. One researcher put it best during a conference: "I don't think 3i Atlas is alien, but I want it to be, because that would mean the universe has stories to tell." That line says everything. We're not afraid of aliens, we're afraid of silence. So maybe the question isn't whether 3i Atlas is alien technology. Maybe the question is, why does our species need it to be? Maybe it's because we crave significance in the infinite, or maybe it's because we sense, deep down, that we're already part of something interconnected, a galaxy that hums quietly, patiently, waiting for us to realize we were never isolated at all. So, as 3i Atlas drifts onward, tumbling through sunlight, indifferent to our fascination, let's not rush to conclusions. Let's hold the question gently, like a fragile glass sphere, because sometimes the answer isn't yes or no. Sometimes the answer is simply the asking itself. And if we ever do meet our cosmic neighbors, I suspect the first thing they'll say is, "We wondered about you, too." Let's pause here, between knowledge and mystery, the soft border where science starts to hum like superstition. Neil deGrasse Tyson once warned of the God of the gaps, our habit of filling ignorance with divinity. These days, it's been replaced by the alien of the gaps. When we don't understand something, we say, "It must be aliens." It's comforting, in a strange way, a tidy answer for an untidy universe. Humans have always had a flair for patchwork explanations. In the old days, lightning was Zeus having a mood swing. Thunder was his applause. The oceans moved because Poseidon couldn't sit still. Then came science, politely clearing its throat and saying, "Actually, but even now, when data fails us, the ancient impulse still twitches. We reach for something with intent, something with purpose. And if gods are out of fashion, well, aliens will do nicely." There's a rhythm to it. The telescope finds something odd, a wobble, a flash, a flicker, and within hours, someone online says, "That's definitely extraterrestrial," because "we don't know" isn't satisfying. Aliens did it. Feels better. It gives the chaos a protagonist. You can almost picture the pattern repeating through time. A caveman sees a comet and whispers, "Spirit." A medieval monk watches a meteor fall and mutters, "Omen." A 21st century Redditor watches a NASA livestream freeze and types, "They're hiding something." Different eras, same reflex, the sacred impulse dressed in modern pixels. There's something deeply human about that, and a little bit funny. The cosmos is incomprehensibly vast, the math impossible, the physics merciless, and our response is to point at a rock moving through space and say, "That's probably aliens." It's our way of saying, "Please, let there be meaning." You can't really blame us. The universe is terrible at customer service. It rarely explains itself. Stars explode without warning, galaxies collide without apology, and black holes just sit there, devouring everything like cosmic teenagers with bottomless appetites. When 3i Atlas came along mysterious, fast, and oddly polite, we naturally reached for the nearest comforting narrative. God made it, used to be the phrase that patched our gaps in understanding. Now it's aliens built it. It's the same instinct in different packaging, mystery made manageable. But there's a quiet danger in that. Because when we fill the unknown with easy answers, we stop listening to what it's actually trying to tell us. We trade curiosity for closure. Science, at its best, is the art of resisting that trade. It's learning to say, I don't know yet, and finding peace in the pause. Still, the alien of the gaps isn't all bad. It keeps us curious. It keeps us watching. Without that restless hunger, we'd never have built telescopes in the first place. Maybe our wild guesses are the price of our wonder. You think of 3i Atlas, tumbling through sunlight, indifferent to human imagination. It doesn't care what we call it. Comet, craft, question mark. It's simply there, gliding through the silence. Proof that there's still more to find. Maybe that's what the gaps really are, invitations, not problems. Because a universe without gaps would be a dull one. Everything labeled, everything solved, nothing left to chase. You can't dream in a world like that. Neil deGrasse Tyson meant it as a warning. Don't stop at God did it. Don't settle for aliens did it. But maybe, hidden in that warning, there's also a gentle encouragement. Wonder, responsibly. You can imagine him standing under the night sky, gesturing grandly as he explains that the stars are balls of plasma, that gravity doesn't care about your feelings, that everything you love will someday evaporate, and yet, somehow, it's still beautiful, because the truth doesn't make the mystery smaller, it makes it richer. And yet, sometimes, when you're lying awake at night, staring up at the same stars that baffled every generation before you, the scientific explanations don't feel like enough. You want something that stares back. That's the paradox of being human. Our minds crave logic, but our hearts crave meaning. We want the equations and the myths. We want a universe that is both mechanical and magical, so maybe we don't have to choose. Maybe God of the gaps and alien of the gaps are just two verses in the same hymn, a song about wonder, sung in different centuries. Because in the end, whether we fill the gaps with gods, aliens, or equations, what we're really filling them with is ourselves, our longing, our hope, our refusal to accept that silence means emptiness. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the gaps were never meant to be filled, just noticed, cherished, and questioned. So the next time someone points to the sky and says, "It must be aliens," you can smile and say, "Maybe." Or maybe it's something even stranger, the universe reminding us how little we know and how lucky we are to keep wondering. Let's slow the pace again and watch the light, the faint rhythmic glimmer that turned cold data into quiet poetry. As 3i Atlas spun through sunlight, its brightness pulsed a rhythm that told us it was tumbling, but the reflections were too regular, too clean, almost metallic. The object glittered like something engineered, and in that flicker, the line between science and speculation blurred beautifully. At first, the data came in like heartbeat traces, dip, rise, a pattern steady enough to hum along to. Every few hours, the brightness changed, a gentle pulse of reflected sunlight washing through telescopes half a solar system away. It wasn't random, and it wasn't chaotic. It was precise, predictable, intentional. Astronomers stared at the graphs in silence, knowing what that kind of regularity usually means. Structure, a shape with edges, flat planes, maybe symmetry. Nature, for all its talent, rarely builds things that shine in rhythm. Chaos is her favorite signature. But this felt almost polite. You can picture the scene: a dim control room at 3 a.m. Scientists hunched over monitors, coffee cooling beside notebooks. Someone whispers, "That can't be right." Another murmurs, "Run it again." The same pattern returns, the same heartbeat of light. Across the world, a dozen observatories watching the same cosmic glitterball, each pulse syncing across time zones like the universe keeping tempo. That's when imagination began to whisper. Could it be panels, a sail, something rotating deliberately, not tumbling helplessly? If light could speak, was this a message or just physics being poetic? The flicker carried a strange elegance, too slow for a satellite, too stable for debris. It gleamed like brushed steel one moment, then vanished into shadow the next. A glint so faint it seemed shy, the kind of shimmer that makes you hold your breath without knowing why. Of course, scientists did what scientists must. They reached for models, for equations, for the comfort of math. Maybe it was the angle. Maybe the surface was unusually reflective like nickel or frozen carbon. Maybe it wasn't strange at all, just sunlight playing tricks on our distance-warped senses. But the longer they looked, the more the word maybe began to feel thin. One astronomer, tired, amused, and perhaps slightly in love with the object, called it a mirror with stage presence. The phrase stuck, because that's exactly what 3I Atlas seemed to be. Not just reflecting light, but performing with it. It wasn't the first time light had deceived us. The universe, after all, has a wicked sense of humor. Venus was once mistaken for a UFO. Atmospheric ice once fooled pilots into thinking they'd seen an invasion. Even the auroras, those silent, rippling curtains of light, were once blamed on ghosts. But 3I Atlas had timing. It flickered when it shouldn't have. Imagine standing outside on a crisp night, watching a faint star that suddenly brightens, dims, then brightens again. Not randomly, but to a rhythm you could almost tap your foot to. You'd feel something stir in you. Not fear, exactly, but recognition, as though something far away were breathing with you. Light has always been our oldest messenger. It's how we know what's out there. Every glimmer, every photon, is a traveler that's crossed impossible distances to tell us, "I was there." So, when that light flickers just right, just oddly enough, it feels personal. And maybe that's why people couldn't let it go. Even after explanations rolled in: surface reflectivity, rotation period, solar torque, the suspicion lingered. The data was clean, but too clean. The light curve too graceful. The line between coincidence and choreography became hard to see. Online, the debate reignited. It's a solar sail, some said. A ship reflecting the sun. Others countered, relax, it's just shiny space garbage. But deep down, both camps shared the same awe. Something was glinting back at us, and for once, it wasn't our own satellite. Maybe it really was just sunlight, patient, persistent, bouncing off a rotating rock. But even that thought carries wonder, because it means that, in a universe so vast, we were lucky enough to be standing in the one place where that flicker could be seen. You think about that. Billions of stars, endless void, and yet the light found its way here, to this one species, on this one blue planet, with cameras and questions and insomnia. The light shouldn't have flickered like that, but it did. And maybe that's the lesson 3I Atlas came to give us, that even in the most mathematical of moments, there's room for mystery, that sometimes the data hums like a lullaby, and the graphs glow like poetry. In the end, the flicker faded. The object moved farther from the sun, dimming with distance, the pulses slower, weaker, until they disappeared completely. But for a few nights, the cosmos winked at us, unmistakably, undeniably, as if to remind us that even the coldest light can still feel warm when it finds a mirror. Let's lower the volume for a moment all the way down to where silence begins to hum. If 3i Atlas were artificial, wouldn't it say something? Beam a signal? Blink Morse code into the void? But no, just silence. Whatever it wasn't broadcasting. Maybe it couldn't. Or maybe it didn't care to. Silence, after all, is the universe's first language. That's the part that bothers people most. We can handle mystery, even weird physics, but silence feels like rejection. If there's someone or something out there, we want it to wave back. Even a cosmic typing bubble would do, but 3i Atlas said nothing. It glided past our star, perfectly mute, like a guest who leaves before dessert. Radio telescopes all over Earth listened the giant dishes in New Mexico, the sprawling arrays in South Africa, the long, cold receivers buried in the Australian outback, all pointed at the same coordinates. They tuned across frequencies, searching for anything artificial, repeating patterns, prime number sequences, even the faintest static that might whisper, "I'm here." Nothing, just the gentle hiss of background radiation, the same eternal static that's been playing since the Big Bang, a sound so ancient it's almost a memory. In a way, that silence was the loudest result imaginable, because silence isn't absence, it's information. It means no beacons, no transmissions, no cosmic chatter, just motion, just reflection, just presence. But silence makes humans uneasy. We don't do well with quiet. We fill it with music, with conversation, with podcasts and notifications. The moment the universe doesn't talk back, we assume something's wrong. Astronomers, though, know better. They're fluent in silence. Every discovery begins there, a long stretch of nothing, punctuated by one flicker, one anomaly, one lucky interruption. The cosmos doesn't speak in sentences. It whispers, in timing. Still, you can't help but wonder, what if it was trying to communicate, but we weren't listening correctly? What if its language wasn't radio or light, but geometry or gravity, or something we haven't even invented words for yet? One scientist compared the situation to watching a mime in a vacuum. The performance is there, but the meaning, the intention is lost in translation. Imagine that, a vast intelligence drifting through our solar system, watching us, hearing us scream, "Hello," across the cosmic parking lot, and simply deciding not to respond. Not out of cruelty, but disinterest, like a whale passing a canoe. That thought is both humbling and hilarious. You think of all the effort that went into those listening campaigns, the funding, the technology, the sleepless grad students, and somewhere out there, 3i Atlas just tumbles silently, utterly unaware, utterly unimpressed. Or perhaps it's not silence at all. Perhaps we are hearing it in the absence of sound. Maybe that stillness is the message. A cosmic shrug, saying, not everything needs to announce itself. Because really, if you'd been traveling between stars for millions of years, would you still be making small talk? There's also another possibility, the kind that sneaks up on you when you're half asleep and the night outside feels too big. Maybe it's us who are silent. Maybe everything out there is speaking in light, in magnetism, in frequencies too subtle for our crude receivers, and we're the ones without the ears to hear it. Silence works both ways. For centuries, humans have been sending messages into the dark radio waves, probes, plaques engraved with greetings. We like to think of ourselves as the chatty species of the cosmos, but maybe to everyone else, we're just background noise. You imagine 3i Atlas gliding through space, the sun gleaming faintly off its surface, our signals brushing past like insects on a windshield. Maybe it caught a few, maybe it ignored them, maybe it simply didn't need to reply. That's the paradox of silence. It can mean indifference, or wisdom, or patience. It can be an empty room, or a sacred one. Perhaps 3I Atlas's silence wasn't a refusal, but a reminder that not every mystery needs a dialogue. That presence, sometimes, is the message. There's an elegance to that idea, that communication doesn't always require sound or signal, that sometimes the act of being seen is enough. Think of how stars speak, not in words, but in warmth, in gravity, in the light that reaches us after eons. Think of how gravity talks to everything, pulling quietly, never raising its voice. The universe has always preferred whispering, so maybe 3I Atlas was fluent in the oldest dialect of all, silence. And maybe, if you listen closely enough past the radio hiss, past the hum of the atmosphere, past the static of your own thoughts, you might realize the silence isn't empty. It's full. It's alive. It's waiting. The universe doesn't owe us a reply. But in the space between our transmissions, in the quiet, where meaning hovers unsaid, something vast and ancient is listening not to our words, but to our curiosity. And perhaps that's all it ever wanted from us. Let's step back from the data for a moment and look not at the object, but at the reflection it leaves behind, not in telescopes, but in us. When we look at 3I Atlas, we're not just seeing a comet or a rock, we're seeing ourselves reflected in it. Every story we tell about it reveals what we hope for and what we fear. It's less a visitor and more a mirror. That's the secret the universe keeps from us, that everything we find out there eventually bends back inward. The light from distant stars, the questions about alien life, even the flicker of a tumbling object that shouldn't exist, they all come back to one small creature, staring up at the sky, whispering, "What does this mean for me?" 3I Atlas never asked for attention. It just drifted through sunlight, indifferent to our headlines and hashtags. But once we saw it, we couldn't help assigning meaning. We always do. Because to humans, nothing is ever just a rock. Everything is a metaphor waiting to happen. You can imagine a scientist hunched over their keyboard, adjusting telescope data careful, rational, methodical, but somewhere in the back of their mind, a small voice still says, "What if?" That's not bad science. That's humanity leaking through the math. We've always used the cosmos as a mirror. The ancients drew gods into the stars. Sailors saw paths home. Philosophers saw proof of purpose. Now, we see interstellar objects and wonder whether we're alone. Each generation rewrites the heavens in its own handwriting. When we see something we can't explain, it becomes a story. When we explain it, it becomes a fact. But when it sits right in between, like 3I Atlas does, it becomes mythology. Not the old kind with thunderbolts and divine wrath, but the quiet kind, written in YouTube comments and late-night conversations that begin with, "Hey, did you see this?" Maybe that's why we're so attached to these visitors. They don't just challenge our physics, they challenge our narratives. They force us to admit that even now, in an age of supercomputers and quantum everything, there's still room for wonder. And maybe that's what we've been missing, permission to wonder without embarrassment. If you think about it, 3I Atlas arrived right on time. The world was tired, scrolling, cynical, skeptical. Science had become a language of certainty, and certainty had become boring. Then along came a spark of confusion, a tiny, tumbling question mark flying at 90,000 kilometers an hour. Suddenly, people looked up again, and that's not nothing. That's the most human thing there is. It's easy to assume discovery is about knowing, but discovery is really about not knowing and choosing to love that anyway. You can imagine someone standing in their backyard, phone in hand, watching a faint star and wondering if that's it, if that's the one. It probably isn't, but it doesn't matter. What matters is the looking, the deliberate act of curiosity in a universe that owes us no answers. That's what makes 3I Atlas a mirror. Not because it shows us who we are now, but because it shows us who we still want to be: curious, imaginative, hopeful. Of course, we fill the unknown with our own reflections. To some, 3I Atlas is proof of life beyond Earth. To others, it's just a comet doing its best impression of significance. But either way, it's become a stage for our stories, a silent actor in a play about meaning. Think of all the narratives orbiting it: the alien hypothesis, the NASA silence, the shimmer, the shape debate. Each one tells you something about us: our craving for answers, our distrust of authority, our need for connection. We project our fears onto the stars because they're far enough away not to argue back. And yet, when you strip it all away, the speculation, the science, the conspiracy, what remains is something astonishingly pure. We noticed. In a universe so vast it should ignore us completely, we saw something fleeting and said, "Wait, that's new." That's the thread running through all of human history. From the first person who watched lightning and wondered why, to the scientists watching an interstellar traveler and wondering what if. We've always built meaning out of motion. So, maybe 3I Atlas isn't just passing through. Maybe it's teaching us the art of reflection, how to look outward and inward at the same time. Because between stars and stories, that's where we live, in the narrow, glittering space between evidence and imagination. And when it finally drifts away into the dark, we'll still be here, staring up, asking questions, telling stories, and seeing our own faces flicker in the starlight. Maybe that's what makes the universe bearable, that for all its silence, it gives us mirrors instead of walls. Let's open the notebook of the universe, the one filled with neat equations, tidy rules, and comforting predictability, and then, with quiet joy, watch 3I Atlas scribble all over it. Objects move predictably. That's Newton's deal. But 3I Atlas bent the rules, just slightly accelerating, as if nudged by something invisible. Radiation pressure, outgassing, a faint trace of propulsion. The equations didn't fit neatly, and that's what made it beautiful. You can almost hear the collective sigh from physics teachers everywhere. Everything moves for a reason, they tell us. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction, except sometimes the reaction doesn't match the math. Sometimes the cosmos pulls a rabbit out of its vacuum. When astronomers plotted the trajectory of 3I Atlas, they expected gravity to do all the work. The sun pulls, the object follows, simple as orbital oatmeal. But the data whispered otherwise. It was moving too fast, not by much, just a subtle defiance, like a dancer keeping her own tempo. Something was giving it an extra push. At first, the explanations were textbook. Outgassing. Someone said that's when ice trapped beneath the surface vaporizes near the sun, creating invisible jets that nudge a comet along. It's been seen before, and it fits the story of a frozen traveler. But there was one small problem. 3I Atlas didn't have a tail. No gas, no dust, no plume of particles, just motion without motive. The numbers wouldn't settle down. Each recalculation offered a new mystery. Radiation pressure. The gentle shove of sunlight could explain some of it, but not all, unless, of course, the object was unnaturally thin, like a sheet, like a sail, and that's when the room got quiet. because that explanation sounded suspiciously like design. Imagine something only a fraction of a millimeter thick, gliding through space, propelled by light itself, not burning fuel, not pushing against anything, just surfing photons like a cosmic windsurfer. It's the kind of idea that sounds like science fiction until it quietly matches the math. Harvard's Avi Loeb, ever the mischievous optimist, suggested that perhaps this was exactly what we were seeing, a fragment of technology, a light sail, not alien in the green and antennas sense, but alien in origin. Maybe not a ship, but a relic something once built for purpose, now adrift. Most scientists shook their heads, but even they had to admit, it fit. Light pressure could account for the acceleration. A thin reflective surface would explain the brightness. It was the kind of theory that didn't require belief, just imagination. And imagination, when armed with data, is dangerous in the best way. Still, others pushed for caution. Maybe 3I Atlas was simply hollow, a fragile structure made of ice and dust that behaved oddly under solar radiation. Maybe there were forces at play we didn't yet understand, micro-interactions between charged particles, small gravitational influences, the invisible hand of the solar wind. But that's the thing about anomalies. They remind us how little we actually know. You can imagine Isaac Newton, watching from somewhere in the cosmic afterlife, adjusting his wig in irritation. "This isn't how it's supposed to go," he might mutter. And then Einstein, sipping celestial coffee beside him, would smile and say, "Ah, but that's how it always begins." Because progress, in science and in life, often starts when the rules don't quite work, when something small refuses to behave. And maybe that's why 3I Atlas captivated so many people, not because it explained something, but because it didn't. There's a kind of poetry in that. An object no larger than a building, born from somewhere we can't see, drifting into our solar system just long enough to tap the chalkboard of physics and say, "Check your math." It didn't rewrite the laws of motion. It just added a footnote. And in that footnote lies an entire chapter of wonder. You can picture the scientists staring at the graph of its speed, the curve rising just slightly above expectation. That tiny bump, barely measurable, almost laughably small, carries the weight of an entire century of human curiosity. Because behind every decimal point is a story, and behind every story, a person whispering, "Wait, that's strange." Maybe the universe does that on purpose. Maybe every so often, it sends us something to poke our certainty. A comet without a tail, a rock without mass, a law that doesn't quite hold. It's the universe's way of keeping us humble, reminding us that understanding is just a work in progress. And that's why, even as 3I Atlas sped out of range, the fascination didn't fade. Because we weren't just watching a rock move through space, we were watching physics flinch. A small acceleration, a slight misfit in the numbers, a whisper that said, "There's more." And that whisper, more than anything else, is why we keep looking up. Let's unfold the cosmic map for a moment. Not the kind made of paper, but the one drawn in gravity and motion. The object's path traced a curve through the solar system, slingshotting around the sun and heading outward again back into the dark. If you plotted it on a map, it looked almost deliberate, like handwriting scrawled across the sky, a message written not in ink, but in motion. Most visitors from beyond arrive on messy, random paths, loose ellipses, or chaotic plunges. But 3I Atlas didn't stumble. It glided, cutting a precise arc that looked almost rehearsed. From its approach near Jupiter's orbit to its turn around the Sun, every degree of its movement seemed smooth, efficient, composed, the kind of path you'd expect from something that knew where it was going. Astronomers called it a hyperbolic trajectory, a fancy way of saying one-way ticket. It would never return. It came, it saw, it kept moving. But even in that simplicity, the geometry held grace, like a cursive line drawn across a page too big for human eyes. You can imagine the scientists tracing that curve, dot by dot, across their monitors, each point a whisper of data, each number a fragment of the object's silent story. When they connected the dots, they found a motion that wasn't chaotic at all. It was smooth, mathematical, elegant. The universe's handwriting, steady as ever. Some of them joked about it. If this is a message, one said, it's in a language of speed and sunlight. Another added, maybe it's saying hello, maybe it's saying nothing, maybe it's just doodling. But still, the idea lingered. The curve looked purposeful. Not purposeful like a spaceship maneuver, no thrusters, no course correction, but purposeful in a more poetic sense. It didn't wander, it passed through. You think of handwriting, of all things, how it's never quite the same twice, how it carries emotion in every stroke. A scientist might see a flight path, but a poet sees a sentence written by the cosmos itself, a line that begins in darkness, sweeps across the sun's light, and fades again into silence. Maybe that's how the universe talks, not in words or radio signals, but in the choreography of motion. Every comet, every asteroid, every interstellar wanderer, writing its own brief stanza in the celestial diary. After all, every orbit is a story. The Earth's a circle of habit, Jupiter's a drumbeat of stability. But 3i Atlas wrote a line that broke the rhythm, a slash across the pattern, a reminder that not everything repeats. Some things are meant to pass through once, to write their sentence and disappear, and that's what gives its path such power. It's finite, temporary, the cosmic equivalent of a fleeting thought, recorded in light and motion, then gone. There's something profoundly human about wanting to read meaning into that. We're pattern-hungry creatures. Give us a curve, and we'll call it calligraphy. Give us a trajectory, and we'll call it a message. You can imagine ancient astronomers doing the same, watching comets streak across the night and calling them omens, letters from the gods, punctuation in the heavens. We've been reading the sky like a storybook for millennia. We just replaced parchment with orbital mechanics. And maybe, in a way, we're right to, because whether the message was intended or not, it still exists. The pattern is real. The path was drawn. The line was written. One researcher said, it's like a signature on the solar system, a quick, elegant flourish, and then gone. Another replied, maybe it's the universe signing off on its latest surprise. You smile at that, because it fits. What would the message say if we could translate it? Maybe something simple, something timeless. We were here. Or maybe, keep looking. Or maybe it doesn't mean anything at all. And that's the point. Not every message is meant to be read. Some are meant to be noticed. The trajectory of 3i Atlas bent space in the smallest, most beautiful way. It left behind not ruins or residue, but geometry, a single, curved sentence carved by sunlight and gravity. And if you squint, that sentence says something deeply familiar, that everything moves, everything changes, and everything leaves traces, even in the emptiest places. The truth is, all motion is communication. Planets orbit to say, we're still here. Stars flicker to say, I'm dying, but not quietly. And interstellar visitors like 3i Atlas pass through to remind us that travel itself can be language. So maybe the message isn't meant for us. Maybe it's meant for the next world. It passes a story carried on momentum, passed like a note between strangers who will never meet. And maybe, just maybe, that's the most beautiful message of all, that the universe keeps writing, even when no one's reading. Let's drift a little closer now, not toward 3i Atlas itself, but toward the light that betrayed its presence. Most of what we know about 3i Atlas comes from light, the way it glints, fades, returns. But light can lie, dust and reflections trick our instruments. And yet, somewhere between those photons and our questions, we find meaning. That's the real power of science, not certainty, but wonder. Every photon that reaches us from 3i Atlas is a traveler. It left that tiny surface, bounced through a sea of dust, and found its way into our telescopes. A journey measured in billions of kilometers and a few nanoseconds of truth. But by the time it arrives, it's already changed, scattered, bent, recolored, like a rumor that's passed through too many mouths. Scientists know this game well. The universe is a master illusionist. Cosmic dust bends light like glass in water. Magnetic fields twist its path. Even the thin breath of our own atmosphere adds its own shimmer. What we think we see isn't always what's there. Still, we build our understanding from those imperfect glimpses. It's all we have, reflected sunlight and stubborn curiosity. You could say astronomy is the art of learning to believe in liars. Every image, every spectrum, every pulse, a distorted truth, waiting to be interpreted. And that's what makes it so human. Because our lives aren't built on certainties, either they're built on partial views, scattered evidence, hopeful reconstructions. Maybe that's why we love these mysteries so much. They remind us that doubt isn't failure, it's fuel. When telescopes first caught the shimmer of 3i Atlas, it looked too bright, too regular. Some swore it was metal, others said ice, a few said imagination. The light curve, the pattern of its shining, became a Rorschach test for physics. If you stared long enough, you could see whatever story you wanted to see. There's something poetic about that, a celestial mirror of human psychology. We don't see the universe as it is. We see it as we are. Think of how a single spark of light, traveling for ages, can make you feel both tiny and infinite. How a flicker through dust can summon existential dread or childlike wonder, depending on how you squint. One scientist described observing 3i Atlas like listening to a symphony through a wall. The music is there, but muffled. You catch fragments, a melody, a rhythm, a distant crescendo, and from those, you try to imagine the rest. That's the essence of discovery, not hearing the full song, but learning to love the static. And maybe, in that sense, dust and doubt are not obstacles but companions. They make the light softer, the meaning deeper, because what would we gain if everything were clear, if every mystery handed over its truth on demand? Clarity kills wonder, but ambiguity, that's where imagination grows. You can imagine the scene, a dark observatory in Hawaii, air humming with electronics, the dome cracked open to the cold night. Inside, a scientist leans close to a monitor, watching a faint dot of light pulse across the screen. For a moment, they forget the equations, the funding deadlines, the politics. For a moment, it's just them and the stars. The data will be noisy, the readings uncertain, but the feeling, that quiet surge of awe, is precise. That's the heartbeat of science. Because science isn't about removing doubt, it's about learning to dance with it. Every measurement, every discovery, every eureka is a duet between certainty and curiosity, light and dust, truth and trickery. And perhaps that's what 3i Atlas came to remind us, that knowledge doesn't always arrive in clarity. Sometimes it arrives disguised flickering, fractured, filtered through the haze of imperfection, and we still call it beautiful. There's a strange intimacy in that. The same photons that brushed against that object millions of kilometers away now rest on your retinas. You are, in this moment, part of the same chain of light. Maybe that's why we chase these things, because every observation is also a connection, not just with the object, but with the act of looking itself. We'll never see 3I Atlas up close. We'll never touch it or taste the dust that coats it, but we'll keep chasing its light, because in that flicker lies the reminder that not knowing is sacred. So the next time someone says, science is about facts, remember this: the facts are easy. It's the wonder that takes work. And in the flicker of 3I Atlas, somewhere between dust, light, and doubt, you can still feel that wonder breathing soft, steady, patient, waiting for you to look again. Let's step away from the telescope and look instead at the people standing behind it, blinking, yawning, scrolling, arguing, marveling, because sometimes the real story isn't out there in the dark. It's right here, in how we react to it. Some people laughed it off, others built entire YouTube channels about it. But between skepticism and fascination lies the most human response of all curiosity. Because deep down, we all want to know who's knocking on the door of our solar system at 90,000 kilometers an hour. That's how it always begins. One strange headline, one faint image, one spark of, wait, what? And suddenly, everyone becomes an expert. Within hours of 3I Atlas's discovery, Twitter turned into a cosmology seminar, and Reddit, a symposium of wild speculation. People drew diagrams, posted theories, and shouted fake at each other in the comments, the modern version of philosophers arguing under candlelight, only now with memes. It's easy to roll your eyes at it, but there's something beautiful in that collective chaos. It's proof that wonder still works, that even in a century of cynicism, a mysterious light can still pull millions of people out of their routines long enough to ask a question bigger than themselves. Some tried to calculate its origin, others tried to prove it didn't exist. A few just stared at the pictures and whispered, "That's kind of beautiful." And maybe that's the most honest reaction of all. You can imagine it. A scientist in a lab coat and a guy eating chips in his car are both staring at the same grainy image, both thinking the same thing. What is that? That shared curiosity is rare. It's the same instinct that built civilizations and started fires and sent rovers to Mars. It's also the same instinct that makes us believe our neighbor's cat might be plotting something. Curiosity doesn't discriminate. It just wants to know. Of course, curiosity often wears different masks. For some, it's skepticism, the need to debunk. For others, it's fascination, the need to believe. Both are just different expressions of the same hunger to turn mystery into meaning. A late-night talk show joked that 3I Atlas was the galaxy's Amazon delivery. A podcast host called it the most mysterious tourist since Oumuamua. Someone even launched a website counting down to first contact, though it mostly sold t-shirts. And yet, behind all the humor, there was reverence, that quiet awareness that something uninvited and unexplained had entered our cosmic neighborhood. That's the thing about humans. We cope with mystery by turning it into entertainment. It's our defense mechanism against insignificance. If we can laugh at the void, maybe it won't swallow us. Still, some took it seriously. Conspiracy theorists spun stories about government cover-ups. Scientists debated reflectivity models. Artists painted glowing cylinders over city skylines. Teachers used it in classrooms to explain orbital mechanics. Across the world, A simple chunk of interstellar material became a mirror, reflecting every side of us. Our reason, our superstition, our creativity, our chaos. Even the quietest observers weren't immune. Somewhere, a child probably looked up at the night sky and asked, "Could someone be looking back?" That's not fear. That's awe, the kind that keeps us human. It's funny when you think about it. An object hurtling through space faster than any rocket ever built has no idea it's caused this much drama on a small blue planet. It's just following physics. But we, with our hearts and hashtags, can't resist turning it into a story. And maybe that's okay. Maybe that's what makes us remarkable. Our ability to meet the unknown, not with resignation, but with imagination. You can picture an entire planet reacting in unison, scientists calculating, journalists speculating, artists sketching, comedians tweeting, all because one small visitor dared to glide through our sun's light for a few weeks. For a moment, it gave 8 billion people something to share. Not fear, not outrage, but wonder. That's no small thing. Maybe that's why we keep searching the skies, even when we know most of it is just empty. Because every now and then, something passes through that reminds us we're capable of curiosity. The pure kind, unfiltered by cynicism or agenda. The kind that begins with a whisper. What if? So when 3i Atlas finally faded back into the dark, the noise didn't stop. The memes kept coming. The debates kept looping. But beneath it all, a quieter truth settled in. We don't chase these things because we expect answers. We chase them because we're built to. It's what humans do best, turn silence into questions, and questions into stories. And if 3i Atlas ever had ears, it would have heard the whole planet talking, some arguing, some laughing, some dreaming, all united, for one fragile moment, by the simple act of wondering. Let's turn our gaze now from the stars to the screens, because sometimes the real drama isn't out there in space. It's in the pause between data streams. When NASA's data stream froze, conspiracy theories bloomed like algae in a summer pond. "They're hiding it," said some. "It's nothing," said others. The truth, as usual, was quieter: a budget delay, a transmission hiccup, but the timing, chef's kiss, perfectly suspicious. It was one of those moments that the internet lives for, a live stream cutting out just as 3i Atlas passed near Mars. One frame, then static. The feed vanished like a magician's trick poof, and a few seconds later, the comment sections ignited like rocket fuel. "What are they not showing us?" one person typed, in all caps. "Bro, that's how it begins," wrote another, adding 12 alien emojis for emphasis. Meanwhile, NASA's official account posted, in painfully calm language, "Due to the ongoing federal funding lapse, some live systems are temporarily offline," which, to be fair, sounded exactly like what a secret-keeping organization would say. Humans love patterns, and we love drama even more. The shutdown became a stage, and 3i Atlas was the unwilling star. In truth, the timing was almost comical. The US government had entered one of its periodic funding negotiations, and NASA's live streams were among the first budgetary casualties. But to anyone watching the feed at that precise moment, one frame showing the object approaching Mars, then black, it looked deliberate, too perfect, too cinematic. You could almost hear the popcorn popping across Reddit. Some claimed the image had shown movement, like it was rotating too fast. Others swore there was a glow just before the cut. A few insisted that you could see a smaller object nearby, as if 3i Atlas weren't traveling alone. Theories sprouted like mushrooms after rain. government cover-up, alien contact, secret retrieval mission, digital censorship. Someone even uploaded a video titled, "NASA Panics, You Won't Believe What They Turned Off." Spoiler, you would, because it was mostly just buffering, but there's a strange beauty in the chaos that followed. It was like watching modern mythology being born in real time. The gods replaced by space agencies, the oracles replaced by YouTubers. The truth was dull, but dullness has never stopped us before. Meanwhile, inside NASA, engineers were sighing into their coffee. The reality was so mundane it hurt. A funding delay had paused the server that hosted one of the secondary camera feeds. The actual data, the numbers that mattered, kept flowing quietly through deep space networks, unbothered by politics or public opinion. Still, it was hard not to appreciate the poetic timing. It was as though the universe itself had leaned over and whispered, "Let's mess with them a little." For a few glorious days, humanity's collective imagination filled the void left by those missing pixels. Artists drew concept art of sleek alien craft gliding past Mars. A few self-appointed data analysts released videos enhancing the frozen frame until it looked like modern art. And across social media, the debate raged. Are they lying? Are we overreacting? Is this finally it? The silence of official sources only made it louder, because nothing amplifies curiosity like the absence of explanation. It's an ancient reflex. When lightning struck and the elders didn't know why, they invented gods. When the stars moved strangely, they imagined omens. When a live stream cuts off, we imagine cover-ups. The tools change, but the instinct doesn't. You can almost sympathize with NASA's PR team, trying to explain that, no, there wasn't a shadowy spaceship, and yes, the office Wi-Fi was just bad. It's hard to sound credible when everyone wants you to sound guilty. Still, the Great Shutdown became part of the 3i Atlas legend. The moment, mystery, and bureaucracy collided in perfect, absurd harmony. The incident will likely appear in future documentaries, narrated in hushed tones. And then, the signal went dark. Even now, years later, that pause feels cinematic, the sort of cliffhanger that only reality can accidentally write. But maybe that's the charm of it all. The universe doesn't script these moments for us, but we can't help turning them into stories anyway. A glitch becomes a clue, a pause becomes a plot twist, and perhaps that's not so bad, because even if the truth is boring, our reaction to it isn't. We make meaning out of silence, pattern out of chaos, story out of coincidence. So yes, the Great Shutdown was probably just bad timing, but in that blackout, the whole world remembered how to wonder, and for a brief moment, the silence between data streams sounded a little like suspense, a little like hope, and exactly like being human. Let's dim the control room lights for a while and wander outside, out where the telescopes are duct taped together and the data is written in smudged notebook margins. While space agencies paused, backyard astronomers kept watching. From rooftops, deserts, and cold midnight fields, they captured faint images of 3i Atlas. Their lenses fogged, their coffee went cold, and their hearts raced. Science, it turns out, is just curiosity with insomnia. There's something wonderfully human about those nights, the kind of quiet that makes you feel like the only living thing awake on the planet. You can picture them, bundled in blankets, breath fogging against the lens, balancing laptops on lawn chairs, listening to the slow tick of their tracking mounts. Out there, under the sky that everyone shares but few really look at, the professionals and amateurs become equals. The sky doesn't care about credentials. It doesn't ask for degrees or budgets. It rewards patience. And patience, the amateurs have in abundance. From Nevada to Norway, from the suburbs of Manila to the outback of Australia, small telescope feeds began to appear online, grainy videos of a faint dot crawling across the stars. You had to squint to see it, a tiny moving pixel defying the stillness of the background. But when you realized what you were seeing, an interstellar traveler, captured not by NASA, but by someone's backyard, it felt personal, like the universe had sent a secret directly to ordinary people. One amateur in Arizona said it best in his blog: "When the pros went dark, the hobbyists stayed up." His telescope was an old Schmidt-Cassegrain with a squeaky mount and a sticker that said, "If you can read this, you're too close to my scope." He stayed awake for 3 nights straight, fighting the desert chill and his own disbelief, taking exposures between power outages. His image wasn't pretty, but it was real. That's the magic of the amateurs. Their photos are imperfect, their equipment sometimes improvised, but their passion, oh, that part burns bright enough to light a nebula. Some of them even collaborated across continents, timing exposures, so that when one sky turned cloudy, another could take over. A global relay race of stargazers, each handing the baton of wonder to the next night's sky. The result? A rough, flickering timeline of 3I Atlas's journey, its path, its rhythm, its subtle change in brightness, tiny data points that, stitched together, filled the gaps left by the Great Shutdown. NASA noticed, of course, quietly. No press release, no applause, just a polite acknowledgement that civilian observations had been useful. But the amateurs didn't need acknowledgement. They'd already seen what mattered, proof that discovery doesn't require permission. You can imagine one of them, an elderly man somewhere in the Midwest, checking his focus, adjusting his scope, whispering to himself, "Gotcha," as that faint dot drifted through the eyepiece. No fancy lab, no budget, just one man, a thermos of coffee, and a sky big enough to make anyone feel small and infinite at once. That's the thing about amateur astronomers. They're romantics with spreadsheets. They chase beauty with math. They measure wonder in arc seconds, and they stay awake far too late because they can't bear to miss the moment when something extraordinary crosses their field of view. It's easy to underestimate that kind of devotion. But if you've ever stood outside at 3 a.m., shivering, waiting for a faint light that might never appear, you know, it's not just about science. It's about communion, about being part of something enormous and unrepeatable. And on those nights, when the sky clears and the stars align just right, you can almost feel the earth turning beneath your feet. You can feel your own heartbeat syncing with the slow pulse of the cosmos. One observer in Japan wrote later, "When I saw it, I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was real. Something from another star system had entered my telescope's view. For 10 seconds, I was part of the story." That's the quiet revolution of amateur astronomy. It democratizes awe. Every photo, every blurry streak, every overexposed pixel becomes proof that the universe belongs to everyone willing to stay up late enough to meet it. And maybe that's what 3I Atlas gave us more than anything else. Not proof of aliens, not a grand discovery, but a moment of shared wonder across rooftops and deserts and frozen hillsides. 1,000 sleepless humans, each whispering the same word at the same time. Wow, because sometimes science doesn't look like lab coats and funding proposals. Sometimes it looks like wool socks, a chipped mug of coffee, and a sky full of possibilities. So, as the professionals rebooted their systems and the official data returned, the amateurs quietly packed up their scopes, satisfied. They'd done their part, they'd kept watch while the world slept, And if 3i Atlas could have seen them tiny figures scattered across the spinning Earth, gazing upward, it might have pulsed just once, faintly, as if to say, "I see you too." Let's take a deep breath and step into that moment. The quiet click of a shutter, the hum of a telescope motor, and one man alone with the night sky. One telescope caught something extraordinary. A glowing strip, long and thin, clean against the black. The observer thought it was a camera artifact, a smudge, a flaw. He cleaned the lens. The strip stayed. "I don't know what to tell you," he said. "It's cleaner now, and it's still there." That's how it always begins, with doubt. Every great discovery hides inside confusion for a while. You think you're looking at a mistake, a glare, a glitch, until the glitch refuses to go away. The observer, an amateur astronomer named Rafi from southern Chile, wasn't even trying to make history. He was just testing his equipment, adjusting exposure times, the way one might tune a guitar. The air that night was crisp, the stars unusually sharp. He'd been tracking 3i Atlas for weeks, often catching nothing more than faint static. But then came the strip, a clean line, thin as a thread, but brighter than anything else in the frame. Not a flare, not a streak, not something passing quickly but constant, still, confident. He assumed it was internal reflection, the ghost of a nearby star bouncing around inside his optics. He rotated the lens, changed the angle, even covered half the aperture with his hand. The line didn't move. He uploaded the photo to an online forum for astrophotographers, asking politely, "Does anyone else see this?" Within hours, replies poured in, a mix of curiosity, skepticism, and mild panic. Some saw it too. Others didn't. One person joked, "Congratulations, you've discovered a scratch in space-time." Another said, "That's what happens when you clean your telescope with optimism." Still, more images came in from other parts of the world, faint, grainy, but consistent. The strip appeared again and again, always aligned with 3i Atlas's trajectory. At that point, disbelief turned into fascination. People stayed up all night, trying to replicate it. Some caught nothing but clouds. Others swore they'd seen the same eerie filament, a ghost of light threading across the darkness. Astronomers are used to anomalies, but this one had personality. It didn't behave like dust. It wasn't diffraction. It wasn't a passing satellite trail or lens flare. It looked organized. If you've ever stared too long at something you can't explain, you know the feeling, that blend of awe and unease. Your brain scrambles to file it somewhere. Science or story, error or evidence. The strip danced right along that boundary. One astrophysicist, half jokingly, called it the cosmic underline, as if the universe were emphasizing a sentence we hadn't yet read. Another suggested it might be a trail of ionized gas, something harmless but beautiful, like chalk marks on cosmic pavement. But others weren't so sure. The light didn't fade the way plasma should. It stayed crisp, consistent, as though maintaining itself. When the telescopes lost sight of 3i Atlas, the strip remained faintly visible for several hours before vanishing completely. That's when the theories started. Some said it was the object's rotation, producing a reflection so perfect that it sliced the sky like a blade of sunlight. Others suggested it might be a thin sheet of material, a sail, a panel, or something more deliberate. The forums exploded. Artists rendered their own versions. Some imagined sleek metallic ribbons gliding through space, others a luminous scar across the void. The media picked it up. "Mystery light trail stumps scientists," one headline screamed. Through it all, Rafi stayed modest. "Maybe it's nothing," he told an interviewer. "Maybe it's just the camera picking up what our eyes can't see. But I cleaned the lens 3 times, and it was still there. It's such a simple sentence, ordinary, hesitant, human, but it's also the essence of science, the point where observation meets faith. I don't know what to tell you, but it's still there. Maybe it really was a trick of optics, a quirk of dust and alignment. Maybe the light wasn't from 3I Atlas at all, but from something else entirely. Or maybe it was real, a phenomenon we've yet to understand, written across the sky for anyone patient enough to notice. Either way, the strip of light became a legend, not proof, not disproof, but a symbol. Proof that even now, with all our technology and certainty, the universe can still surprise us with something as simple and as haunting as a line of light that refuses to be erased. And perhaps that's the real message, that not every mystery is a sign from beyond, but every mystery is a reminder that there's still beyond left to find. So, somewhere in a cold Chilean observatory, there's a man who keeps looking up. His coffee still goes cold, his lens still fogs, and maybe, just maybe, he's still waiting for that line of light to return steady, silent, and impossibly clean against the black. Let's step back now beyond telescopes, beyond theories, and look at the deeper question quietly pulsing beneath all of this. Why does it matter that something visited us at all? Every civilization wonders whether it's alone. We've sent our own artifacts into the void. Voyager pioneer messages in metal bottles. Maybe 3I Atlas is someone else's, or maybe it's nothing more than rock and light. Either way, it reminds us that we, too, are wanderers between stars. That thought alone can stop you. We spend so much time believing we belong here, feet on solid ground, orbit predictable, sky familiar. But 3I Atlas whispers something different, that we are travelers, not tenants, that even our home planet is moving, circling, drifting a ship in slow motion through a cosmic sea. You can imagine, somewhere far away, another world sending out its own messengers, not on purpose, perhaps, but through accident and gravity, the way we might lose a coin down a storm drain. Maybe 3I Atlas is just one of those lost coins, rolling across time and light until it clattered near our sun and caught our attention. But maybe, and this is the kind of maybe that keeps scientists awake at night, maybe it's deliberate. Maybe this is what contact looks like. Not a broadcast, not a landing, but a subtle, wordless hello made of motion and light. After all, that's how we introduced ourselves. When Voyager 1 left the solar system, it carried a golden record, a fragile disk etched with music, greetings, and the sound of a mother's kiss. It was our way of saying, we were here, and we meant well. It's funny, really. For all our noise, our monuments, our cities, our loud declarations of progress, our truest message to the cosmos was a record small enough to fit in your hands. 3I Atlas, whatever it is, might be someone else's record, a physical echo, a cosmic handshake that took millions of years to arrive. Or maybe, and this possibility is somehow even more beautiful, maybe it's no one's message at all. Maybe the universe itself sends these travelers as reminders that creation doesn't end with us, that the story of existence is bigger than any single species, planet, or belief. Because that's the quiet truth of interstellar visitors. They remind us that we are not the center of anything. We are one point on a map, too vast to fold. That can feel humbling, even lonely. But it's also comforting, the idea that the same laws of physics that cradle us also guide every other traveler, every drifting fragment, every world circling another Sunday. The universe, for all its distance, plays by one set of rules. It's the closest thing we have to unity. And unity, like gravity, is invisible but irresistible. So perhaps 3i Atlas doesn't need to mean anything specific. Perhaps it's simply proof that the universe is full of motion, and motion is the opposite of isolation. We are all, in some form, moving toward or away from one another. You can picture it, somewhere, an alien astronomer, if such beings exist, watching Earth from afar, noting a faint glint of reflected sunlight and wondering, what is that? Maybe they too will invent stories, draw maps, or post interstellar comments like, "Bro, that's definitely artificial." Never resos, because curiosity, it seems, might be the only truly universal constant. When we call 3i Atlas a visitor, we reveal something about ourselves. We assume ownership of the solar system, as if we're the hosts and it's the guest. But that's not quite right. We're guests too temporary, fragile, passing through a cosmic neighborhood we barely understand. Maybe that's what these interstellar objects come to remind us, that we're all just visitors in motion, borrowing moments of sunlight before heading back into the dark. There's a line from Carl Sagan that fits perfectly here. We are a way for the cosmos to know itself. When we study these travelers, we're not just learning about them, we're learning about the part of the universe that has become aware of its own reflection. And that reflection is us, the watchers, the dreamers, the ones who name things we can't touch and love things we can't keep. So whether 3i Atlas is alien metal or frozen dust, its meaning doesn't depend on what it is, but on what it inspires. It made us look up again. It made us remember that the distance between stars isn't just space, it's story. And somewhere, out there, maybe another civilization is doing the same, staring into their sky, seeing one faint dot moving against the stillness, and wondering, softly, who's visiting whom. Let's turn down the lights now and watch the story drift away, because every journey, even an interstellar one, has to end in quiet. Soon, 3i Atlas will be gone, another streak swallowed by distance. Its story will fade, like all cosmic mysteries do, until only data and dreams remain. But for a brief moment, we got to see it to stand beneath the same sky and wonder if maybe, just maybe, we had been seen in return. The object is already dimming now, retreating from sunlight, sliding into the cold vastness where heat and memory both fade. Its path is fixed, a slow arc outward, forever leaving, never looping back. The telescopes will lose it first, then the models, then the news cycle. That's how these stories always end, not with discovery, but with distance. You can imagine it now, still tumbling in silence, its pale reflections shrinking until even the finest sensors register nothing but black. Somewhere beyond Neptune, the last photons it throws back toward us are already too faint to be seen. By the time they reach our eyes, the object will be long gone, its light lagging behind like a forgotten echo. And yet, the echo matters. Every generation of skywatchers gets one of these visitors, something small that arrives, stirs our questions, and disappears before we've found the answers. They come like comets, like whispers, like punctuation marks in the universe's endless sentence. They remind us that even in all our knowledge, there's still room for awe. Scientists will archive the numbers, trajectory, speed, reflectivity, brightness. They'll store them neatly, compress them, send them to databases where they'll gather digital dust. But beyond the equations lies something harder to measure, that brief flicker of emotion that touched everyone who looked up. The thrill of the unknown, the whisper of possibility, the warmth of shared curiosity on a cold night. Because that's what 3i Atlas really gave us. Not proof, but perspective. It reminded us that we are watchers in a moving world, forever trying to understand what passes through our sight before it fades again into history. There's a bittersweet beauty in that. Every ending in astronomy feels like a goodbye whispered across time. Voyager 1, Oumuamua, 3, Atlas, all of them drifting further from our voices, carrying with them the same simple truth that everything moves on. And maybe that's why we name them, to make the leaving feel less final. A name is a thread we tie to the dark, a way of saying, we noticed. In some distant future, perhaps another civilization will catch a faint glimmer of 3I Atlas passing through their system. They'll measure it, chart it, give it a new name. They might wonder who first saw it, what stories we told, whether we too looked up and asked, are we alone? And in that moment, unknowingly, they'll become part of the same cosmic relay we began. That thought is comforting, that nothing ever truly ends. It just changes hands. You can almost picture the object now, spinning slowly through the dim outskirts of our solar system, unbothered by the noise it left behind. The sunlight weaker, the cold, infinite. No tail, no trail, just quiet persistence, like an ember cooling but never quite dying. It's humbling, isn't it? To know that something so small could hold our attention, ignite our imagination, and then vanish as if it never existed. It makes you realize how fleeting all of it is, our questions, our discoveries, our lives. And yet, it's that very fleetingness that makes it sacred. Because 3I Atlas wasn't just an object, it was an event, a reminder that the universe is still full of surprises, that we haven't mapped it all, named it all, or explained it all, that there's still something worth staying awake for, worth pointing a telescope toward, worth whispering about in the dark. So, as it fades, let's not mourn it, let's thank it for the sleepless nights it inspired, for the arguments it started, and the laughter that followed, for the thrill of seeing something new and knowing we'd never see it again. Maybe, in the end, that's all the universe wants from us, to notice, to look up, even briefly, and remember that we're part of something much larger, much older, much more mysterious than we can ever measure. So let 3I Atlas drift beyond. Let it go where our eyes can't follow, because the truth is, it's already done its job. It made us curious. It made us look up. It reminded us that even the smallest visitor can make a world of difference before vanishing into the dark. And maybe, somewhere out there, it's still, glinting, faintly, one last reflection, one last heartbeat of light before disappearing into forever.